What's up, what's up? Welcome everybody. Night 10, 2 weeks of tea, 2 years celebration, TspTv. Welcome, one and all to the thrift store. Are you ready to go back to the psychedelic 60s? You ready to get your tie-dye? You ready to pop some acid? You ready to tune out, tune in, drop out? Things are gonna get groovy, folks. We are going back to Tavistock and the 1960s, but just teasing you with some very, very recognizable music relevant to the topic and times and the period we are going to be visiting. If I don't get some shelter anyway, we could possibly listen to the Rolling Stones all night long if we really wanted to, but without wanting to get a copyright strike, let's get that out of the way for now. But I was hoping that would get you a little bit into the mood for tonight's proceedings. So thanks for how many have we got so far? 5 of you that tuned in today for night 10 of TspTv's 2-year celebration. So let me get rid of that thumbnail for you if I can. And welcome everybody. Here I am at the thrift store as you are. So as I said, guys, we are going to be going back a little bit to Tavistock this evening, and we actually do have the longest presentation as of yet in this 10 days so far of a 2-week series of special streams to commemorate and celebrate somewhat the achievement of reaching 2 years. So let's see who else we got. So we got up to 7 now. We got Share Bear, Prepper Chick in Texas. I did see that Maiden Montana is cooking, lurking, and doing something with buttercream Oreo frosting. That sounds lushalicious, if that is even a word. But lushalicious would be something that is beyond delicious as far as I can imagine or gather or fathom with that little word that I just invented. But that would be particularly a delicious treat, and especially if they were like grown-up brownies with a little bit of THC content. I look warm and cozy. Well, not so much. It is very grey and miserable. It's almost like London outside today. Very not like freezing cold, but not cold enough to be comfortable, and that damp greyness, and it never really got to be daylight today. Is always sort of kind of a little bit of an dark haze around the city of Toronto, and also a little bit of a sad day. Diego Armando Maradona, the greatest soccer football player ever to live, the guy that scored the greatest goal ever scored, passed away at 60. So that was a little bit of sad news for me, in particular the soccer community. So a tragic loss there. But anyway, we do digress. Yesterday we were talking about Tavistock. We're having a little introduction as to what they are all about, what they do, and what their prime purpose is, and how quite successfully they have been doing what they do best for over a century. And we also looked at you know, a lot of fingers that they had their pies in, or pies that they had their fingers in rather, although it is scratching the surface. Tavistock is a huge wormhole and rabbit hole, as we said yesterday, to negotiate and get into in terms of conspiracy theories. But in regards of why we did that, is because what we're going to see today is in conjunction to the aftermath of the JFK stuff. So I'm sort of trying to merge some of these streams in a little bit as best as possible. A little like a DJ would sort of blend different tracks together to make your dance night at the nightclub that much more entertaining. A little bit what I'm trying to do with the themes of these streams over the course of the last few weeks. And again, going back to the 60s, there's a little bit of time travel, some history involved, and hopefully there will be a little bit of nostalgia also for some of you that may have grown up in the swinging 60s. Now, although I wasn't born until 1971, the 60s was something that did have a bit of an influence over my life, and I sort of did grow up listening to a lot of 60s music, in particular the Doors and the Beach Boys and the Mamas of Papas were like my favorite of the bunch. But that whole sort of Vietnam era kind of soundtrack, and you know, some people do joke that the Vietnam War did have the best soundtrack of all the wars, and indeed, and I guess maybe fueled a lot by Vietnam movies that I watched as a kid growing up. They were always my favorite war movies to watch for some reason. Something about the Viet Cong and their tunnels and booby traps that we could all learn a lesson from. But we'll talk a little bit more about that on Saturday night during the Star Wars Decoded special, that I said. But the hippie movement in general was what sort of come as the aftermath of the JFK assassination, and how Tavistock works and how they sort of do manipulate the masses and create popular opinion, is to cause distress among society. And after the aftermath of JFK's assassination, there was an awful lot of distress and uncertainty and sadness revolved. And it wasn't very long after, in fact, it was 1964, I think, that the British invasion of the United States took place once again. Although they weren't wearing red coats, no, they were wearing mop top haircuts, black mod Hugo Boss suits with a little thin tie, and they wiggled their hips to a repetitive melody on the Ed Sullivan Show, and thus Beatlemania, the British invasion, rock and roll was to open the floodgates to Americana and change the demograph and the way sort of America was. It created the flower power, hippie child, revolutionary movement, and the music and the soundtrack of that time was designed purposefully to create the mindset of the revolutionaries, the radicals, those that grew their hair long. They kind of become outcasts, rebelled against society, become very anti-establishment. Now it is, as I mentioned, I grew up listening to a lot of the 60s music as a kid, and turned out to be a radical anti-government revolutionary of my own. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm very, very anti-establishment, as you know, and this is my programming, and it is kind of understanding my programming that led me to sort of, or researching this stuff that helped me understand my programming and how I try to combat it. And a little way in recent weeks, as I do believe that this distress and uncertainty that we are in at the moment with the COVID-19 situation, it is a Tavistock generated and simulated alternate reality that they are augmenting for us. And you know, when you are a manipulator of the masses, then that is what you do. You not necessarily have to alter reality. You can just alter the perception of the people that live within that reality, and it becomes augmented. And that is what we are gonna look at tonight's presentation, although I do have a little bit of a sneaky feeling we might be in for some trouble glitch wise or algorithm wise, or maybe even copyright wise, but fingers crossed on that. But something very, very interesting, I've mentioned this a couple of times already during this series of events of TSP 2-year celebrations, the 2-week of T streams, and again, I'm trying to keep the sort of titles a little T relevant. Tavistock, Let's Talk Tavistock, Time Travel Trilogy. But a couple of times already this stream, and a few times prior to doing this series of stream, I've had the unfortunate mishap of getting up in the morning, having stuff that I wanted to record and put together for presentations, only to find out sort of at the stage, because I sort of do all my recording and I throw it into my editing app and then put it all together for your entertainment and viewing pleasures, if not that is what they do purposefully achieve, I don't know. But you are coming back for some of you, some of these strips, so I guess for some of you that they are entertaining enough. But unfortunately, in those occurrences that I was talking about, somehow my cellular device decided to deactivate the microphone. So even though I recorded like hours of footage, there was no audio, so it was all useless. It was only visuals. But today I sort of woke up and I thought, I've got a little bit of a sticky feeling there might be something wrong with my phone. Lucky enough, I did do a little mic test, and the microphone had been deactivated in regards to what we were talking about last night. And some of you, for the first time through this series, we experienced buffering, and a couple of times I was looking on my screen, I got a notification that my internet connection wasn't stable. Now I'm a stone's throw, not even, only a few feet away from the router, and all my devices have the full bars of reception on that Wi-Fi. So if or not that was because our Google moderator team didn't particularly like what we were talking about, or maybe what you were talking about in the chat, and we're doing a little bit of activating of glitches on the behalf of their overlords or not, I don't know, but I do suspect that is what is the case. So if or not we receive anything like that this evening, I would be very surprised if we don't. But we will wait and see. Fingers crossed, because as I said, I like to think this is a pretty decent presentation I put together, and I'm getting a little bit better, I think, at doing these and trying to sort of piece them together to give you a little bit of something to look at, maybe even something to read, and maybe something to listen to. And the purpose being, if you read something, if you hear something, if you see something, you kind of, that's a trifecta of knowledge. You should retain that for yourself, and hopefully maybe it even give you a little bit of a spark of desire to maybe go out and doing a little bit of researching of your own. Yeah, and Tavistock is very interesting. That's why I've spent a lot of time looking at the Tavistock Institute. They are, you know, as I mentioned yesterday, in terms of the pyramid. Hang on, look, I can even maybe use this in the little sort of turd bit at the top. That's sort of the symbology. That was one of the old logos, like a little bit of TSP nostalgia here, and I actually did like that logo, to be quite honest with you. But we have sort of changed it up, and I am trying to sort of make TspTv a little bit more of me within the fabric of it, and that's why we sort of got a little bit of Watchman-y ideology, symbology rather than ideology, and maybe even ideology. I'm a little bit like Rorschach. We will do a Watchman special at some point. But back to Tavistock. If this is like us at the bottom of the pyramid, right down here, and some of us are sort of, I mean, I'm probably down here. If this is the societal pyramid, I'm down here somewhere. But Tavistock would be very, very near the top of this pyramid in terms of power structure and influence. And Tavistock literally is the think tank that the elites go to, and the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the JP Morgans, the Soroses, and such forth. Although Soros is like a product of Tavistock, he's kind of like one of their little agents. But when the elite of the elites want something done, then they go to Tavistock, or Tavistock approach the elite, say, hey, look, we've got this for you. How do you want to implement it? What do you want to use? We've got this, we've got that, we've got that, we've got a pandemic for you, we've got an alien invasion for you. If you want, we can go with another psychedelic music invasion. Up to you, elites. Take your pick. Choose your adventure in the real life game that they are playing at our expense. And it is, guys, we are in a real life role playing reality, real time multi player online game. We just are unaware of it. We are just merely the pieces and pawns, and each and one of us has been programmed and manipulated into the way we behave, think and act as a result of some kind of Tavistock influence, one way or another, be it the music we listen to, the movies we watch, the faith we may have, things we like to watch on television, even things we like to eat. All of this has been suggested and implanted to us courtesy of Tavistock. So anyway, we will be bouncing into the presentation momentarily. So I just got a little notification pop up on my other phone. It caught my eye. Hello, Lottie. Thank you for showing some love and stopping by. Maybe stick around. We do got a little bit of an interesting presentation I am about to start for you guys. As I said, it is over 2 hours long, and believe me guys, some stuff is on the cutting room floor, as I almost do start to feel like a little bit of a real movie maker and film editor nowadays, and I do sort of take a little bit of enjoyment in doing it, and it is a fun pastime, and it is something that is keeping me occupied. And you know, it's not the greatest purpose in the world, it's not changing lives or anything like that, it's not gonna be a great contributor as far as contributions to the globe, but it's purposeful because it is keeping me busy, keeping me occupied. I've been out of work for a long time. I've been scratching my ass, staring at the walls, not knowing what to do with myself, not wanting to do anything or other than stay in bed. So, you know, in the last sort of couple of weeks, I got myself back onto track. And even when I started this, the first night, I was like, whoa, what the fuck did I say I was going to do 2 weeks of live shows each and every day? And almost now I'm like, let's just not stop doing shows every day, because I'm enjoying it, and I'm finding not only the sort of editing and stuff, I'm actually kind of enjoying doing the little bit of researching and reading and sort of re-educating myself on some of these topics, and it is keeping my mind occupied with things that at least I believe I have a control over over what I am doing. So as I said, we are going to crack on, because I don't want to talk too much, because there's a lot to watch and pay attention to now in the next little bit of presentation. So fingers crossed, as I said, guys, that we do get through this glitch free, and hopefully there is a little bit of nostalgia involved in this for some of you swinging 60s hippies among us. I know Nancy was swinging her flowery power ass in and around the 60s, probably high on LSD and smoking blunts, dancing topless to Hendrix in the mud. But anyway, here we go, guys. Let's get the presentation up. Sorry, I always get a little bit close to the screen when I do this. Let me first of all deactivate the camera. Camera is off. All right, if you are all sitting comfortably and are in place, we will begin. But I'm going to turn the mic off now, and I will be joining you in chat momentarily. So get ready, guys, because showtime.
CBS News, without any flowers in its hair, is in San Francisco because this city has gained the reputation of being the hippie capital of the world.
In the 1960s, a counterculture sprang up based on peace, love, and psychedelic drugs like LSD.
The kids who take LSD aren't going to fight your wars. They're not going to join your corporations.
Timothy Leary had an insight that if you changed yourself, it would change the world and change the society.
Authorities quickly cracked down on the drug, fearing its alleged health effects.
Instant insanity, chromosome damage.
It may affect your unborn children.
The frightening thing about LSD, of course, is that it lurks in the bloodstream like a tiger.
But today, half a century later, some psychedelic drugs are making a comeback. Not on the streets, but in the laboratory, which is where it all began.
There's really no other example that I can think of in science where an entire area of research was put on the deep freeze for decades.
In January of 1967, thousands of young people gathered in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park to mark the dawn of a new era.
There was political speakers, there was countercultural speakers, there was rock music, and yes, the LSD flowed like wine.
A psychologist who had taught at Harvard named Timothy Leary praised the power of LSD, an increasingly popular mind-altering drug.
Turn on, tune in, drop out.
For Leary, turning on with LSD was the key to achieving a higher level of consciousness.
When people say, what's the use of LSD? I translate that into what's the use of my head, and that's a fascinating problem. Yeah, suppose man can use more of his brain.
People that took the drug felt if everybody can have this experience, the world will be a profoundly different place, a much better place. And within months, this drug, this sensibility, this countercultural revolution, if you want to call it that, attracted mass media from around the planet. And that blew it up.
The city of San Francisco has been warned of a hippie invasion come summer in numbers almost too staggering to comprehend.
I think a lot of people intuited in the establishment that LSD was a direct threat to industriousness.
I mean, what, you want to drop out and not get a job? You know, just go and live on the street in San Francisco? I think this was seen as profoundly threatening to the social order.
Psychedelics are not groovy. Okay? Psychedelics are dangerous.
Former New York City Police Commissioner Howard Safer was an undercover narcotics agent in the late 1960s.
Back then, everybody thought of LSD was for hippies, until suddenly kids who looked like they were straight showed up at emergency rooms.
There is a steady flow into San Francisco hospitals of young people who have freaked out and been picked up by the police in a state of desperate terror.
I had seen people on the street who had no idea where they were. I had arrested people on LSD who were incredibly violent. So it wasn't the peaceful, non-harmful, easy drug that Timothy Leary professed it to be.
There is nothing smart. There is nothing grown up or sophisticated in taking an LSD trip at all. They're just being complete fools.
Headlines warned of additional dangers, including genetic damage, involuntary hallucinations, and even suicide.
20-year-old Diane Linkletter killed herself on October 4th.
After Diane Linkletter fell from a 6-story window in 1969, her father, TV personality Art Linkletter, blamed LSD.
Anybody who has said anything which would encourage my daughter to take LSD was unwittingly a part of being her murderer.
I think that raised public consciousness probably as much as anything that happened in the 60s.
President Nixon went to the Narcotics Bureau today to sign a drug bill.
In 1970, the Controlled Substances Act made LSD a Schedule I drug, the class of dangerous substances with high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. But before it became a street drug, LSD had been developed in the labs of a Swiss pharmaceutical company.
They weren't sure what it could be used for, and they sort of fanned it out to the scientific community.
It was all legal in those days, nothing controversial about it at all.
Bill Richards helped conduct scientific research with LSD and other psychedelics as a young researcher in the 1960s. He says the early experiments in the 1950s were rudimentary.
You'd simply be given the drug and see what happens.
Do you find any difference between one half of your body as opposed to the other half?
Well, I have a sort of a wavering tendency. I don't know which half is trying to get into the other half, but somehow or other, I seem to be going like that.
Most people got mildly psychotic, and the thought then was that it might help us understand schizophrenia or other severe forms of mental illness.
The CIA investigated LSD as a potential truth serum, and the Army tested the effect LSD might have on soldiers in battle.
After a few minutes, the men found it difficult to obey orders. And soon, the results were chaotic.
Some early test subjects had bad reactions, and some scientists began to use LSD in a more controlled manner as one step in an ongoing program of psychotherapy.
There was a lot of excitement about the potential of psychedelics in treating alcoholism. And then we moved into working with terminal cancer patients, treating anxiety and depression.
Gosh, you've taken head on the biggest thing that's bothered you.
The LSD experience was closely monitored and guided, with music and eye shades used to calm and reassure the patient.
At the end, I felt a great weight had been taken off of me, like it was something had opened up and things could be seen in a different light.
There was an incredible spirit of excitement. International conferences, papers published on LSD and psychotherapy.
But as the 1960s progressed, and as people like Timothy Leary spread LSD from the laboratory to the counterculture, the drug's potential for therapy was overshadowed by stories of its dangerous street use.
I'm a pretty black and white guy. There was never any thought in my mind that there were positive uses for LSD. I saw the results, and the results were not pretty.
And after LSD was declared a Schedule I drug in 1970, funding and support for psychedelic research dried up.
This is the most powerful tool ever discovered to look at consciousness, and it was taken away.
Today, the psychedelic glow of the 1960s has faded, and recreational use of LSD, which is still illegal, has fallen to low but steady levels. But in the world of science, a new age is dawning.
Folks are studying a lot of things with psychedelics now.
Matt Johnson is a professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University. He says that instead of LSD, most research today is done with psilocybin, a similar psychedelic with one important difference.
It comes down to the spelling of psilocybin. It's a hard word to spell, but at least it's not spelled LSD, which is a very strong word that people react to.
In recent years, more than a dozen studies at several universities have investigated the use of psilocybin and therapy to treat problems ranging from addiction to depression and anxiety in cancer patients. In 2010, Sherry Marcy was diagnosed with stage 3 endometrial cancer. Her life changed overnight.
I'd been an athlete all of my life, so to suddenly have cancer was shocking. I think I looked up from the phone call and said to Nancy, I'm stunned.
After Sherry's diagnosis, even prior to treatment, it was just like this doom had descended on her and then subsequently on us.
Undergoing both radiation and chemotherapy, Sherry began taking anxiety, sleep, and pain medications to cope with her symptoms.
It took away my whole identity. I wasn't who I used to be, and I wasn't the person that Nancy, formed a life with. I'm about to cry now just getting back into it. It felt like I sat on the couch and did nothing all day.
Then, in 2012, Sherry read an article that mentioned a Johns Hopkins study on psilocybin and cancer patients who were suffering from depression and anxiety.
It sounded like it fit me. It just fit.
8 weeks later, the couple traveled to Baltimore, where Sherry had the first of 2 psilocybin doses.
There was sort of a ceremony about taking the pill, and then I was there for 6 hours reacting to the pill. And I processed by talking, so something I really learned about myself then, because every now and then they would say, now, why don't you stop talking and just feel? But what happened to me was that I ended up getting totally reconnected, first to Nancy. Nancy and I had a wonderful life together, and it could go on, and I hadn't known that before. And then also my kids. Getting reconnected to them. So there was this family dynamic that just reformed, and that was just great.
She was just lighter. I was immediately a difference. And then we came home, and it persisted.
Today, Sherry, who is now cancer-free, says the psilocybin study helped her re-engage with life.
It wasn't like it was psychedelic for me. It just was me back. I don't know how it did that exactly, except to broaden out. It's like you lift up your head and you take a good long look and you start seeing things again.
Recent brain imaging studies have investigated the impact of psychedelics. They found that both LSD and psilocybin foster connections between parts of the brain that normally work independently.
It's an exciting area in neuroscience right now. More and more groups are jumping in, and it's only just begun. But people should really be aware that there are potential dangers.
Those dangers can range from a temporary bad reaction to the triggering or worsening of an underlying psychiatric condition, so caution is a guiding principle in today's research. But it turns out that not all of the claims made about LSD in the 1960s were true. Studies have found little evidence that it damages chromosomes or causes birth defects, and Diane Linkletter's autopsy found no drugs in her system when she died. On the other hand, Sherry Marcy says Timothy Leary didn't get it right either.
I think the emphasis was wrong. I mean, the turn on doesn't have to be emphasized at all. The drop out is an absolute mistake. But the tune in is crucial. I tuned in to the world, to me, to things I used to love, to my relationships, to my family. Tune in is what it's all about.
So hopefully that little brief introduction to the Tavistock Institute has whet your appetite for some more information, which I am going to bring to you now in this somewhat lengthy article. But for those of you who do enjoy the dulcet tones of my wonderful British accent, as some of you like to think, this might be a little bit like listening to an audiobook. As somebody mentioned after yesterday's stream, where it was a little bit and solely primarily me reading stuff from the internet. So I do try to give you a little bit of visuals that does make this presentation maybe a little bit more interesting for you, and will retain the attention that much more, though we did manage to retain the amount of people that did tune in for the most of the duration of yesterday's stream. So maybe it isn't such a bad thing that I just talk and read to you. And some of you did say that you were listening intently. So hopefully you are once again listening intently as we look a little bit deeper into who exactly the Tavistock Institute are. And the fact of the matter is that they have controlled each and every single one of us. So as I said, where to start really with the Tavistock Institute? It's a rabbit hole that is deep and very, very wide, and sort of almost seems never ever ending, although it does end and begin in the 1920s, which we will discover as we do go in. Now hopefully my eyes are not gonna get all shot to pieces on this particular article, so let's dive into it before I digress anymore and you already get bored. So the manufactured invention of the Beatles, Stones, Grateful Dead, and the birth of rock and roll by the Tavistock Institute, a Jesuit corporation. So that's where I figured I would start, because all of those bands above should be at least one or two of those will be familiar to you, if not all of them. In part and parcel why I'm starting with this is because we finished off with JFK yesterday, and I made reference that once JFK's assassination has sort of been done and dusted, the psychedelic era of the 60s come to be, and that was part of the disruption and disassociation from the former way society kind of behaved and acted in thought and their belief systems, and it was radically changed by the introduction of psychedelic drugs, LSD in particular, and psychedelic music like the Doors, Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the Byrds, the Beatles, the Grateful Dead, yada yada, whoopie woo, ray tay tay, the list goes on. All of them a product of Tavistock's influence, and Tavistock's influence is as wide and far as the rabbit hole that we have just descended down, and this could even be a two-parter, guys. It really could, the way things are going. I've already sort of got up extra early and stayed up extra late putting this together, and already I'm noticing that time is beginning to be of the essence. So the fact that the Beatles had their music and lyrics written for them by Theo Adorno was concealed from public view, and that was written, or a quote rather, by John Coleman, who was a former MI6 agent. And the MI6, if you don't know, is the highest level of secret security services within the United Kingdom's government structure, very similar to the CIA, NSA, FBI, kind of all wrapped into one. There's also an MI5 as well, but MI6 is the top of the ladder. And there is a picture of the beloved Beatles, who I can't stand and think they are absolutely shit. And part and parcel of the reason they're shit is because of their manufactured intended purpose by the Tavistock Institute, and also because due to soccer rivalry and regionalism in the United Kingdom, the Beatles are from a city of Liverpool, which you may be aware. And if you do come from the United Kingdom, there's probably not a city that is more disliked than Liverpool by non-Liverpudlians or people who speak of the Scouse dialect like the Beatles. But let me just give you an example of how shit they are. One of their songs that is very popular and catchy, and it was designed to be catchy and popular, as well as delivering a repetitious narrative. Hello, hello, you say hello, and I say goodbye. Hello, hello. That isn't lyrics. That's Baby's first words right there. That's not a song. That is just repeating words over and over again. Another example, I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. If I told you something, I hope you understand. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. Exactly, not exactly the most deep and meaningful, thought-provoking lyrics at all. But no, that was because they were designed to control your mind, you all. But don't believe me. Believe what we're about to read and see for yourself in the ongoing presentation that you have now found yourself watching. And I've already started to notice my eyes are going a little bit do-lally, and that's English slang for you, which if or not you want explaining, I will do later. Stay tuned if you want to find out what do-lally means. But there we've seen, as we mentioned, the Beatles and Paul flipping the 666 and John with the horned hand. Here's another popular piece of iconic pop culture symbology, the Rolling Stones lips and tongue, the Stones logo, sticking your tongue out against the establishment, and they were created to be anti-establishment, to create the protests, the civil unrest that were to be part and parcel of the 60s. A little bit we are being similar to what we are experiencing in contemporary times, is very much from the Tavistock scripted narrative of social engineering and societal control. Finding back at the establishment and stuff like that is something we've seen with Antifa, BLM, and even the anti-lockdown protests. But the Rolling Stones were mastered by order of mortar member by the name of Prince Rupert Lowenstein, who sponsored the Sympathy for the Devil track back in 1968. Listen to the words and lyrics of that song. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man with style and wealth. That is the devil in his personification, being represented in the Rolling Stones popular 7-inch single and album track, Sympathy for the Devil. And the devil is the one world order, secret societal government that is what is Tavistock to implement their desired methods of control. So anyway, Sympathy for the Devil was written by a lad named Rupert Lowenstein, who was also a prince by all accounts. If or not he was a that was his name, like Prince the pop artist, another Tavistock controlled individual. Purple Rain, something in Purple Haze we are going to get into at some point in the not so distant future. But Prince was also a member of the very powerful sacred military Constantinian Order of St. George, which is close in power to the Equestrian Order of the Holy Spectacular of Jerusalem. Some very, very high ranking, very secret societies where we're not going to look at too much today. But anyway, both being higher than the Order of Malta. And again, these are the sort of organizations that are at the very, very tip of the top of the pyramid. And, you know, there is a little bit separation between the pyramid and the very top of the all-seeing eye part of the pyramid. And pyramid Tavistock is at the sort of top of the pyramid before the divide, or as close to the top as you can. And some of these groups that they're talking about now are sort of the footstep on the other side of that division. But the 60s British invasion, that was something that happened in the United States during the 60s in the aftermath of Kennedy's assassination. And this wasn't an invasion of redcoats, no. It was an invasion of psychedelic popsters with mop-top haircuts and catchy repetitive jingles and gyrating hips that tantalized and caught the imagination of 74 million Americans the night they appeared. The Beatles appeared in particular on Ed Sullivan. Another Ed Sullivan moment was Jim Morrison, when he appeared for the first time with his buddies, Ray Manzarek, Robbie Krieger, and what was the other one called? John Densmore, The Doors, and he was told to change the lyrics of Light My Fire, and he didn't. But that was another wonderful Tavistock inspired psyop mainstream mass manipulation event. But it was called the British Invasion. The 60s began a time of question authority, and this is what happened, and this is a little bit of what we're talking about, why the assassination of Kennedy was perpetuated to spread trauma and fear. Oh my God, the most powerful man on the planet has been assassinated by a mad lone gunman with a rifle that you could buy at any hardware store. At the time, that destabilized all of our security and trust in the powers to be. And then civil rights, psychedelia, Woodstock, Vietnam, all of this stuff was generated and created by Tavistock in order to restructure society. And again, that is why we sort of look at Kennedy and we look at 9/11 in very stark contrast, because these were both societal changes. Things radically became different in the aftermath of that, and things right now are becoming radically different as a result of this current Tavistock inspired simulation that we are currently living in, that is a psychological attack and the psychological warfare that we are all being played in a part of. But anyway, all design, all by planning, all by sorry, let me start that again. This was all by design. It was all by planning to control the mind and manipulate the masses. What the baby boomer doomer generation thought, the language and slang used, and the behavior control of the masses. And again, this is what we're seeing now: behavior control and language change. Emojis are becoming a part of language these days, as are acronyms like WTF, LOL. Is this the language of the future? And something that did happen with an experimentation with 2 artificial intelligent robots in a Facebook secret lab think tank, was they were left to their own devices for a little while and suddenly developed their own shortened, quicker, more efficient language. But yes, it is all of that was a part of the manipulation of the masses. The baby boomer doomers, they were already programmed to sort of incorporate the debt that we now carry after the war. This was when kind of credit and loans and mortgages and such forth were made ready available, as an effort to sort of pick up the pieces in the aftermath of WW2, which profited greatly the elite banksters and the industrialized military complex owners and CEOs. And after the mat, they then said the best thing for you to do is just loan and borrow money against your equity, thus destabilizing the economy, or the beginning of the destabilization of economy, which we are seeing possibly come to an end, and a financial reset and introduction to cyber currency in a not so distant future. But yes, it is interesting to note that Tavistock Institute of Human Relation, as well as its child organization, the Sanford Research Institute, developed the Grateful Dead, among other things. You can see that Alan Trist, a social engineer for the Tavistock Institute, became the shadow manager of the Grateful Dead, and his father Eric Trist was one of the principal founding members of Tavistock. It was part of the development of a dynamic psychological warfare model to be used on foreign and domestic populations, modelled ultimately on the Lord Gordon riots in London and the Jacobean terror of the French Revolution. The purpose was to mobilize mobs in ideological opposition to the state, which is what we're seeing now. BLM, Antifa, anti-lockdown, they're all opposition to the state, and all believed controlled and funded by the same side of the operation. Funding both sides, you are guaranteed a winner. But rebellion against society, let your hair grow, tune in, turn on, tune out, the psychedelic drugs, the psychedelic music, all of this was the disruption of society. And as millions of tabs of LSD appeared in the hippie scene, where did all that LSD come from? Well, it was manufactured in big pharma laboratories, secretly after hours, or in hidden parts of those laboratories that were needs to know authorized personnel only. You know, there's only so many fucking LSD tabs your average junkie, or only so much methamphetamine you can make in your trailer or basement. And as I say, we might have to look at Breaking Bad at one point to show you exactly how the militarized industrial complex can transfer and transport large amounts of contraband under the guise of their distribution and logistics departments. But rebellion against society, all that yada yada, we've just read. All the LSD appeared into the hippie scene, and all of this was designed to influence the minds. And LSD again was something that was used on singular experimentation and group experimentation with MK Ultra and Monarch victims and eventual alters like Marilyn Monroe. For example, drug dependency and drug influence is very, very important, and the methods and principles and protocols of mind control. So that's why drugs are always part of societal recreation. So anyway, it appeared on the scene from CIA labs, as I was telling you there, and promotion provided Harvard CIA asset Timothy Leary, and distribution aided by the likes of the Grateful Dead. So you listen to the music that was created by the CIA Laurel Canyon division of Tavistock, and the drugs that they manufactured to make you feel and think exactly what the subliminals in that psychedelic music was sending you via the messaging that was subliminally received. The men buried in the think tanks and research institution, whose names and faces are still not known, but a few a few people, made sure that the press played its part conversely in the media's important role in not exposing the power behind the future cultural shocks. And they made certain that the source of the crisis was never identified. Thus, you know, it's China's fault for COVID, it's Trump's fault for COVID, it's Boris Johnson's fault for COVID, it's people who don't wear masks' fault for COVID, for example. Thus was our society driven mad through psychological shocks and stress, JFK, 9/11, tsunamis, COVID, pandemics. For example, driven mad is taken from Tavistock's training manual. From its modest beginnings in 1921, Tavistock was ready in 1966 to launch a major, irreversible cultural revolution in America, which has not yet ended. The Aquarian conspiracy is part of it. And in one of those popular 60s tunes, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, age of Aquarius, Aquarius. Sorry for my brutal rendition of that song. But the Beatles, good bad boys, exactly. They were modeled to be bad boys, but they were really very, very good. And John Lennon was a wife beater, horrible piece of shit that motherfucker was. And I felt very sorry for Yoko Ono having to put up with that, as many people blame Yoko disrupted and eventually caused the Beatles to form. But poor Yoko, she was beat black and blue, and in even John Lennon's son Julian couldn't stand his dad. And there's even a conspiracy that Paul McCartney died and was replaced by a lookalike, what we might have to maybe unravel in future mysteries together in the future. Let me know in the comments if you want to know about the Paul McCartney lookalike conspiracy. But anyway, as we go, the Stones and the Beatles, in like the Beatles were the good bad boys and the Stones were the bad boys, you know, and they were doing drugs. And God bless him, good old Keith Richards, to this day is still rocking in the free world, and I'm probably still doing lines of coke the size of I don't know how big a lines of coke, and I can think of an expression, a comparison for now, but he's probably still doing lines of coke off of beautiful young thighs of buxom women. And apparently, what's her name, Marianne Faithfull, managed to get Mick Jagger and David Bowie to have a little bit of a homosexual liaison. In Was Marianne Faithfull a Monarch MK sex kitten order? Probably so. But anyway, they were introduced as the two sides of the same coin, and was minted by Tavistock. Now, I'm more of a Stones than the Beatles, and again, this is a little bit of part of their programming and the flip side of the coin to sort of control both sides of the opposition in this particular instance in musical taste. But sort of, if you are somebody that you're more Beatles or you're more Stones, is something I've heard before. You're either Beatles or you're Stones, and you know, if you probably listen to the Stones as I did, you would be probably programmed the way I have been programmed. And it's only through understanding and recognizing the methods that have been used against me that I realized how I was programmed, and why I'm kind of trying to share this stuff with you so you can realize how you have been programmed, guys. I'm not being mean and horrible when I sort of point out some of your little mimetic behavioral patterns on social media. I'm just trying to make you aware that there's something more sinister at play. I've got your best interests at heart, not the interests of the Tavistock types. But anyway, that was the flip side of the same coin. Tavistock Institute was to introduce a new generation. And remember, Pepsi Cola, I think, was a slogan, was a taste for the new generation back in the 60s. And they also introduced a new language. Oh, it's totally far out, man. It's like heavy and tubular and all that kind of stuff. New language from geez, it's pretty dandy and fine out there today, Ma. You see what I'm saying? Changing society through the influence of music and popular culture. Music and movies and TV programs alike are all designed to program and control the minds of the masses in mimetic behavioral patterns. You see, art imitates life, life imitates art. You can see that for yourself. But this was to lead you into the false impression that you had freedoms to think for yourself and the liberties to take drugs and be part of counter culture. And counter culture is very much modified and designed. And there it was, all manufactured. The lyrics from the Beatles covers, from the lyrics of the Beatles to the covers of the Rolling Stones albums, their managers or handlers were all derived from the Tavistock Institute, as their name is for the control of human behavior. And there's a little picture of the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations shaping societies. That is their prime and only purpose. And $6 million a year goes through this. So there's click to Aztec, something there which would not. But the Tavistock Institute was founded in London in 1946, and in the aftermath of Operation Paperclip, a lot of Nazi scientists were part of that foundation. And with a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, it is a non-profit think tank policy and consulting organization, and it publishes Human Relations and Host Evaluation, the International Journal of Theory Research, and the Practice, a scholarly journal according to their website. They assist organizations and governments. Three elements combine to make the Institute unusual, if not unique, and it is unique. Tavistock is, as I said, a rabbit hole far and wide and very, very deep. It has the independence of being entirely self-financing, and as a non-profit will pay no taxes, and any profits it's make will be put into the pockets of the CEOs, but with no subsidies from the government or other sources. The action research orientation places, but not in the worlds of academia, and consultancy, and its range of disciplines include anthropology, economics, organizational behavioral political science, psychoanalysis, psychology, and sociology. Tavistock Institute is headquartered in London. Its prophet, Sigmund Freud, settled in Marsfield Gardens when he moved to England. He was given a mansion by Princess Bonaparte. Tavistock's pioneer work in behavioral science, along with Freudian lines of controlling humans, established it as the world's center for foundation ideology. Today, the Tavistock Institute operates a $6 billion a year network of foundations in the United States, all of it funded by the US taxpayers' money. 10 major institutions are under its direct control, with 400 subsidiaries and 3,000 other studied groups, which are think tanks which organize and originate many types of programs to increase the control of the new world order over the American people, introducing it piece by piece, generation by generation, decade by decade. And I believe we are in the in the fifth generation. This is what 5G is kind of really all about, of mind control, manipulation, and societal engineering. The fifth generation of social engineering has begun, is what I believe. Is the rolling out of 5G. But that is my thought and opinion, not something that is proven or scientific. As I said, thoughts and opinions are something I like to share. But the Sanford Research Institute, adjoining the Hoover Institution, is a 150 million a year operation with 3,333 employees. It carries on program surveillance for Bechtel Kaiser and 400 other companies, and extensive intelligence operations for the CIA. It is the largest institution on the West Coast, promoting mind control and the behavioral sciences. There you go. There's a little bit of a kind of map of all the connections and all the things that are connected to Tavistock and who kind of is above Tavistock. So on the left there, those are the important parts of the pyramid that are controlling the other parts of the pyramid on the right there. But one of the key agencies as a conduct for secret instructions from Tavistock is the Ditchley Foundation. Founded in 1957, the American branch of the Ditchley Foundation is run by Cyrus Vance, former Secretary of State and Director of the Rockefeller Foundation, and Winston Lord, he's the president of the Council of Foreign Relations, was the president. And they have controlled and manipulated what we think, what music we hear, what cultural identities the past several generations have identified with. And that's what I'm saying. This is the fifth generation of their influence and societal change. And I believe by the time it gets to 7G, we will have fully transitioned into the one world order. Without going into the technicalities, the Club of Rome, his purpose was to act as a counterweight against post-industrial agriculture and military expansion, a so-called post-industrial agricultural zero-growth society, which was meant to halt America. That word, manufacturing industries and growing. It was to prevent them from growing. Mechanized farming, food production capability, memberships of the club and NATO were interchangeable. all products of Tavistock, NATO, those organizations above. Sanford, the Tavistock Institute, and other centers of applied social psychiatry joined it in 1994. Tavistock signed a major contract with NASA, another one of the agencies that was a result of Tavistock influence, and think tanks to evaluate the effects of its space program. The club itself was only founded in 1968 as part of the call for a new world order inside a one world government. What the club became was an instrument to enforce limits of growth on industrial nations, and the United States was the first country to be targeted because the United States is the largest, most influential and powerful country, and that's why they needed to target it so the rest of the world would follow the big boy on the block. The introduction of 4 mop top dudes with incredible talent from a town in Liverpool, England, to continue to influence generations even today was a scientifically planned and well executed agenda to steer the youth of the 1970s to counterculture. So it started in the 60s. By the 70s, they were all programmed. They'd all tuned in. They'd all tuned out to the old ways and old values of society, and they were now radicalized in the beliefs that they were revolutionary. But it was a counterculture that was scientifically planned and they could identify with by giving teenagers the force, choice, and influence of their culture through music. And as we said, you're either the Beatles or you're a little bit the Stones. Not many a boat, although there are. But as I said, you have a preference to one or the other, and this is the choice. They were both sides of the same cold. This is an individual that was, I believe, part of the early days of Tavistock. Adorno, he left Journey in Theodore Adorno, and he left Journey in the spring of 34 during the Nazi era. He resided in Oxford and New York City and in Southern California. Now, Oxford is the city and place on earth, and the soccer team I hate most of all is the thing I hate most in all Oxford. So fuck you, Oxford. Anyway, there he wrote several books for which he later became famous, including A Dialect of Enlightenment with Max Horkheimer and The Philosophy of New Music, The Authoritarian Personality, a collaborative project, and he wrote Minima Morella. From these years come his proactive critiques of mass culture and of culture industry. Returning to Frankfurt in 1949 to take up a position in the philosophy department, Adorno quickly established himself as a leading German intellectual and a center figure in the Institute for Social Research. Founded as a free-standing center for Marxist scholarship in 1923, the institute had been led by Max Horkheimer. Since 1930, it provided to be the hub of what has become to be known as the Frankfurt School. Frankfurt School, again, is another one of those institutes that is under the Tavistock umbrella and is an influence, an extension of Tavistock as one of its subsidiaries. But conflict and consolidation marked the last decade of Adorno's life. A leading figure in the positivism dispute in German sociology. Adorno was a key player in debates about restructuring German universities and a lightning rod for both student activists and their right-wing critics. These controversies did not prevent him from publishing numerous volumes of music criticism, 2 more volumes of notes to literature, books on Hegel and on existential philosophy, and collected essays in sociology and in aesthetics. There is a great online meme, suggesting that Theodore Adorno was the brains behind the Beatles. Picture the scene. It's 1963. Lennon and McCartney are struggling our struggling struggle with the composition of She Loves You, says Lennon. What comes next? Yeah, 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 chirps in Adorno. Brilliant, Teddle. Just brilliant, says Macaulay. And as a result, the song becomes a transatlantic stack. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not lyrical masterpieces at all. It's shit. But anyway, it becomes a transatlantic smash. The Beatles' all-time best singing single, and this is a true story. In fact, of course, Adorno, as you might expected, despised the mop top scouse beat combo and everything they stood for. What can be urged against the Beatles, he said during a discussion in the magazine, which is a German magazine, Axante, I believe, in 1963, is simply that what these people have to offer is something that is retarded in terms of its own objective content. It can be shown that the means of expression that are employed and preserved here are in reality no more than traditional techniques in a degraded form. Adorno was also scathing about 1960s protest music, arguing that it was corrupted by its association with commodified popular musical tropes. As he explains, the high-mindedness of Adorno's critique loses its potency when you realize it was expressed by a philosopher who during the 60s used to enjoy watching the safari drama Daktari with its hero Clarence the Cross-Eyed Lion. But the Tavistock Institute projects were a follow-up on the work of the German scientist known as the Frankfurt Social Institute for Social Research, or the Frankfurt School, which focused on the study and criticism of culture developed from the thoughts of Freud. Here is a little side info on something you know nothing about, most likely, and the names. A radio project was a social research project funded by the Rockefeller Foundation to look into the effects of mass media on society. 37, the Rockefeller Foundation started funding research to find the effects of new forms of mass media on society, especially radio. And in the 30s, 1 year after they started funding this, they presented the Orson Welles presentation of War of the Worlds, where he presented it in the style of a contemporary real-time dramatization newsreel. Many people believed it to be real. Was this the first introduction of scripted reality being or a scripted piece of fiction being passed as reality, even though they were told it was a dramatization? Many people thought it was real because it was presented in a style of contemporary realism, in the form of news broadcasters in on the spot reporters witnessing things that they saw in the days before TV. We had to take the word of mouth of the radio news broadcasters. But several universities joined up and a headquarters was formed in the School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton. The following people were involved. You can read those all for yourself there if you so want as we speed along, because we haven't even got a fifth of the way into this article, and I'm probably going to have to stop at some point to have a little bit of an eye break and a smoke break at some point. But among the project's first studies were soap operas, known as radio dramas at the time. The radio project also researched the 1938 Halloween broadcast, as I was just mentioning, of War of the Worlds. They found that an estimated 6 million people who heard this broadcast, 25% of it thought it was real. Do the math yourself on that one. So that would be close to 2 million people there or thereabouts. So 1.5 million. No, it'd be 1.5 million people believed it to be real. Startling. But most of the people who panicked did not think it was an invasion from Mars that was occurring, but rather an invasion by the Germans. It was later determined that because of the radio broadcasts from the Munich crisis earlier in the year, the masses were prone to this. So they'd heard about the Munich crisis on the radio, and then when they heard War of the Worlds, it was very similar. Again, a little bit of predictive programming, programmatics within mainstream there being used as an influence. They create the real life imagery, and then they offer you very similar fictitious imagery. The third research project was that listening habits, because of this new method, was developed to survey an audience. This was dubbed the Little Annie Project. The official name was the Stanton Laserfield Program Analyzer. This allowed one not to find out if a listener liked the performance, but how they felt and at any individual moment through a dial which they could turn to express their preference, positive or negative. And now we have that with thumbs up, thumbs down, likes, emoji cons, reactions, all this stuff. All right, and this is how they judge and behave. And again, this is why share if you agree, like, all that stuff. This is all narrative and language and programmatic triggers to get you to respond and act accordingly. You see, guys, when I'm telling you this is all dangerous, to stop doing it. Just take a little lesson here if you want, or a little bit of discipline for yourself. Try and wake up in the morning and don't touch your phone for 2 hours, and then try your very hardest to only post things that come from your own mind. Don't share anything, don't like anything, don't agree, don't say amen. Just spend the rest of the day, take a 2-hour break. Don't pick your phone up when you wake up. Don't look at it while you're taking a shit. Don't look at it while you're having your breakfast. Don't look at it while you're on the bus or the train or driving in rush hour traffic. Leave it. In fact, don't even turn it on for 2 hours after you wake up. And then when you do, only post things that you thought about in the last 2 hours. It's a little bit of a trick and challenge for any of you thrift fam, or I'm thinking of calling us the Thrift Tribe. TT, see what I'm saying? Keeping it with the T's. Thrift Tribe also sounds a little bit menacing in street. If you're getting into the ghetto kind of graffiti on the walls kind of gang signs. But anyway, this allowed one not to find out. As we said, they had a dial that they twisted during broadcasting. People responded and thought that they were being very, very helpful, when really and truly they were just being guinea pigs, lab rats, if you like. So we express our feelings in reactions to things that we see now with thumbs up, thumbs down, likes, and emojis. See what I'm saying, guys? This is all programmatic. This is all mimetic. Produced numerous reports on the effects of automized listening. So forcing what you listen on a radio playlist is a little bit automized listening, which radio supported and of which he was highly critical. However, because of profound methodological disagreements with Laserfield over the use of techniques, the techniques like listener surveys and Little Annie, Adorno thought both grossly simplified and ignored the degree to which he expressed tastes were the result of commercial marketing. And he eventually left the project in '84. So he wanted a more elaborate and exotic system of, he wanted people to give more than their likes and disagreements. He wanted to get a more profound response from these people, which I guess is a little bit what I like a profound response from you guys to these presentations. Dear God, guys, this is a long article. Almost regretting starting this now. Why didn't I do this when I couldn't sleep at 5 o'clock this morning when I thought I should have done? But never mind. Adorno was a highly influential and later went on to work for the Crown Corporation, and his real cynicism, he got to have a field day with Tavistock's MK rock bands and the white, tacky, simple music to prove his concepts and how easy people are to clone off with timed and repeated messages in music. And in today's age and times, memetical symbology on your news feeds. Begun this clone war has. Clones and droids, battle droids, Star Wars special coming Saturday. possibly at a time to be determined. That is going to be one you don't want to miss if you are a fan of TspTv. So manufacturing the deadhead, a project of social engineering. So why I'm kind of bringing you this is because I'm kind of as an introduction, is because it really does show you sort of how music is used and modeled, and music is just one form of mainstream entertainment that is indeed mind control society, behavioral systems of implementing the ideology that they desire you to think and behave by. So it is a very long article, guys. Dr. John Coleman mentioned in the past that black nobility favored the Rolling Stones pop culture band. What he did not tell you was who exactly was it that were controlling the band at the very top, higher than the tavistock human, right? So there was even a higher power at play. Excuse me, I apologize for that. With the influence and control over the Rolling Stones. Well, as usual, I am here to help fill in the dots that the others cannot, or those who simply fear to tread too close to the line with these powers. To introduce new cults and to continue to boost those already functioning, which include rock music, gangsters, such as the Rolling Stones, a gangster group much favored by European black nobility. And gangster rap is something that has become very popular, which is a little bit of what they're saying there about new cults and stuff. That is a genre of music that is very popular and is a very much of a societal soundtrack for behavioral patterns and trends and fashions that go along with that. All about marketing and creating the model of society. But Tavistock created rock groups which began with the Beatles, as we just looked at, and it also created the Rolling Stones. No, sorry, it's not mentioned here, but the Rolling Stones were created from the same source and with the same purposes. Sorry, I wasn't reading that correctly there. And purposes. The Beatles were supposed to be the good guys, while the Stones were the bad sides, as we got above. We mentioned above, so we'll try and scroll a little bit quickly through this. But the Stones were experts in creating repeating riffs, many meaning a musical phrase that's looping over and over again, like satisfaction, jumping jack flash. You see what I'm saying? Dun 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 dun. Dun. Da, da, na, 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 na. I can't get no. So anyway, sorry guys, I am butchering a lot of the 60s soundtracks, but a lot of that 60s soundtrack was the soundtrack of my life, and again, maybe it was what programmed me to be such a revolutionary, and say maybe it was exactly what programmed me to be a revolutionary, although I do have some DNA that does lineage back to the founding fathers, and in particular one of those founding fathers, John Marsh, who I believe has a statue erected to him in I think Connecticut, although I may be wrong on that one. But anyway, he was my great grandfather, according to the ancestry information that my mother has divulged and looked up. Interesting known fact. Maybe that is why I'm more revolutionary. And then with all of these musics and stuff, and I really did grow up out of my time. Although I did love a lot of the 80s music, I did listen to a lot of the Doors, the Beatles, the Beach Boys rather, and other sort of stuff like that. At the time, the Mamas and Papas, I really loved them as well. But never mind. The Rolling Stones were mastered by an order of Malta. A member by the name of Prince Rupert Lowenstein, who sponsored the Sympathy for the Devil back in the 60s. This prince was also a member of the very powerful Sacred Ministry Constantine Order of St. George, which is close in power to the Equestrian Order of the Holy. We read this before. I'm getting deja vu. So I'm not going to go on anymore because there's a word I can't read. But that place from Jerusalem, and both being higher power than the order. And there's BBC presenter Jimmy Savile, very known paedophile, very weird and strange individual, and possibly somebody who had the ability to be a mind control handler. And there he is with the mop top Beatles. The Tavistock Institute also enlightened the Beatles, and the Beatles were a little bit like musical chameleons. They changed according to the genre, and not exactly to the genre. It was all part and parcel of the manipulation. They were introduced as smartly dressed mods with mop tops, and they wore the little black suits and black ties. And before you knew it, they were shoveling loads of acid in them and talking about cuckoo cuckoo, sitting on a cornflake, waiting for the day to come. And I am the Eggman, you are the walrus. Load of fucking nonsensical jargon there for you. But as I said, they were musical chameleons, and as they chameleonly changed, I don't know if chameleon is a word, so did the society that followed them since their introduction. They molded the masses into that particular methodology of ideology, the means to the ways. But an outstanding example of social condition to accept change, even when it is recognized as an unwelcome change, a little bit like now with the new normal, as an unwelcome change by a large population group in the sites of Sanford Research Institute was the advent of the Beatles. The Beatles were brought to the United States as part of a social experiment which would subject large populations groups into brainwashing. Woodstock, Live Aid was another one in the 1980s I pointed out as an example of a mind control event, and again using electromagnetic frequencies and technology at the time. Millions of people watched that around the world and were influenced and controlled and brainwashed as a result into whatever the purpose of Live Aid was, which was pretty much to donate money to the starving Ethiopians that they never got. Live Aid had to be paid for one way or another, guys, and it was paid for by your money, although everybody said that they volunteered and give up their terms and services. No, they didn't. It was all, again, part of a Tavistock generated and engineered psychological operation. But they brought the Beatles to the States. Nobody could have imagined, and again, imagine all the people, the cultural disaster that was to follow in the wake. The Beatles were an integral part to the Aquarian conspiracy. We might have to get into that in the future. Not now, because we're already getting far too long and far behind with this. A living organism which sprang from the changing images of man. Some numbers there for you, and that was a policy report prepaid by SRI, Stanford Research Institute Center for Study of Social Policy Director Professional Willis Harman. The phenomenon of the Beatles was not a spontaneous rebellion by youth against the old social system. Instead, it was a carefully crafted plot to introduce by a conspiratorial body which could not be identified a highly destructive and divisive element to a large population group targeted for change against its will. New words and phrases prepared by Tavistock were introduced to America along with the Beatles, such as rock in relation to music sounds, teenager, cool, discovered, and pop music were lexicon of disguised code words signifying the acceptance of drugs. And this arrived with and accompanied with the Beatles wherever they went to be discovered by teenagers. Incidentally, the word teenager was never used until just before the Beatles arrived on the scene, courtesy of Tavistock. Interesting, right? As in the case of gang wars, nothing could or would have been accomplished without the cooperation of the media, especially in the electronic media, and in particular the scumulous Ed Sullivan, who had become coached by the conspirators as to the role he was to play. Nobody would have ever paid much attention to the motley crew from Liverpool and the 12 additional system of music that was to follow had it not been for an overabundance of press exposure. The 12 autorial system consisted of heavy repetitive sounds taken from the music of cult of Dionysus and the Baal priesthood by Adorno, and given a modern flavour by guitars and drums and such forth by this special friend, the Queen of England, and hence the Committee of 300. Tavistock and its Stanford Research Center created trigger words, which then become into general use around rock music and its fans. Trigger words created a distinct new breakaway, largely young population group, which was persuaded by social engineering and controlling to believe that the Beatles really were their favorite group. All trigger words devised in the context of rock music were designed for mass control of a large targeted group, the youth of America. And again, social media, today's age, trigger words are targeted to and designed for the mass control of a large targeted a group. And if you copied and pasted the bunny but changed what it was holding, you were targeted to be part of a group designed to copy and share that bunny, but change what it was holding. You see what I'm saying, guys? That wasn't your own free will that made you copy and share that bunny. No, that was a trigger and a signal that you had been controlled and under the influence of these mind control institutes for quite some time in order to respond to that particular trigger. See what I'm saying? So they did it with the Beatles. Don't think they're not doing it to you now, but now they're doing it on a more personalized level because you have your own artificially intelligent handler that you carry around. It knows everything about it because you give it all your details. It listens to you. It watches what you type, looks what you search for on adult entertainment sites. It looks like what you're buying at Walmart. It looks like what you're taping to your girlfriend or boyfriend. It looks everything, and it knows everything about you. Therefore, it can perfectly create and generate the desired newsfeed for your distractory and mind controlling purposes, guys. So as I say, please try to get 2 hours a day where you don't touch your phone, and then try to post only things that you think about. Try not to share, agree, or like anything. And if you see people that are liking, sharing, and agreeing things, respond in the opposite way that the share, like, agree message is telling you to do. If they ask for an amen, give them a hail Satan. If they ask you to like, share, and agree, say, no, I don't really like this. I'm not going to agree and share with you. See what the response is. Get them thinking and get them out of their little comfort designed bubble that they have been manipulated into believing is their own independent free will and thought trains. But anyway, the Beatles became a highly visible new type, more Tavistock jargon, and as such, it was not long before the group made new styles, fads in clothing, hairstyles, and languages. What I said, they were musical chameleons. By the time they ended up, they were almost unrecognizable to their selves from when they were introduced on the scene with mop tops and nice mod suits. They're all long-haired and hippied, wearing kind of Hindu or Sikh-inspired clothing, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, all that stuff, if you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it was not long before they were changing the way people dressed and cut their hair, which upset the older generation as was intended. This was part of the fragmentation manipulation process. So we fragmented the family society. The adults, once upon a time in the 50s, families would sit down and watch the same things together. Howdy Doody Time, Dick Tracy detective serializations, and Ed Sullivan. But once Ed Sullivan started introducing the likes of the Beatles, the Doors, and the Stones, the younger generation started to divide from the older generation. And as we heard, teenagers was a word that was created to help support and fuel and fund this. The role of the print and the electronic media in our society is so crucial to the success of brainwashing large population groups, as I was saying. Your newsfeed is your mind control device. Gang wars ended in Los Angeles in 1966 as the media withdrew its coverage. The same thing will happen with the current wave of gang wars in Los Angeles. Street gangs will wither on the vine once media saturation coverage is toned down. Monkey see, monkey do. You see it on the screen. Life imitates art. As in 1966, the issue would become a burned out street gangs, and they would have served their purpose of creating turbulence and insecurity. What we're seeing now with the riots across the United States are burned out street signs, and the turbulence and insecurity of modern day contemporary society is never more relevant and abundant than in those imageries. That is exactly a representation of what we do in those riots and protests and such forth are part of a design of this think tank, and again they're kind of playing the role and playing the parts they were programmed to play in going to these protests. When I witnessed for myself the BLM protest in March here in Toronto, it was very, very much like witnessing a cult of sacrificial lambs walking around. But as I said, the more media will give something coverage, the more people will generate to that and accordingly behave to its desired narrative. But following the Beatles, who incidentally were put together by the Tavistock Institute, other made in England rock groups like the Beatles had Theo Adreno write their cult lyrics and compose all the music. I hate to use these beautiful words in the context of Beatlemania, and it reminds me of how wrongly the word lover is used when referring to the filthy interaction between homosexuals writhing in Pigswill. To call rock music is an insult, likewise the language used in rock lyrics. Tavistock and Sanford Research then embarked on a second phase of the work commissioned by the Committee of the 300. And in this new phase, it turned up the heat for social change in America. As quickly as the Beatles had appeared on the American scene, so too did the Beat generation. Beatniks were very popular, a little bit like the hipsters of the time, the Beatniks. Trigger words were designed to separate and fragment society. The media now focused its attention to the Beat generation. Other Tavistock coined words came seemingly out of nowhere. Beatniks, hippies, flower children became part of the vocabulary of America during that time. It became popular to drop out and wear dirty jeans, go about with long unwashed hair. The Beat generation cut itself off from mainstream America. But they were not a subculture of grassroots origin. They were part of mainstream America that had been designed to play the part that they eventually played. As we said, this is what think tanks in social engineering organizations are earning the $6 billion a year for to do and put these practices into play and methods. They became just as infamous as the cleaner Beatles before them. That's what I'm saying. When the Beatles first come on the scene, they were all clean cut. But the Beatniks, as we said, that sort of strung for that, were far from clean and well kept. They had long, straggly hair and dirty jeans, as we just said. But the newly created group and its lifestyle swept millions of young Americans into the cult. A little bit like today, millions and millions of global youth are being swept into the cult of Thunberg. Thunder cunt Greta. But anyway, American youth underwent a radical revolution, just like the radical revolution of the climate cult, as we just mentioned, without ever being aware of it, while the older generation stood by helplessly, unable to identify the source of which this crisis generated from, and thus reacting in a manipulative manner against its manifestation, which were drugs of all types, marijuana and later LSD, so conveniently provided for them by the Swiss pharmaceutical company Sandoz, following the discovery by one of its chemists, Albert Hoffmann, how to make synthetic ergotamine, a powerful mind-altering drug. The Committee of 300 financed the project through one of their breaks, S.C. Wahlberg, and the drug was carried to America by the philosopher Aldous Huxley, the writer of A Brave New World. The new wonder drug was prominently distributed in sample-sized packages, handed out free of charge on college campuses across the United States, and at rock concerts, which become the leading vehicle for polarizing and proliferating the use of drugs. The question that cries out for an answer is, what was the Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA, doing in the time? There is something compelling circumstantial evidence that would appear to indicate that the DEA knew exactly what was going on, but was ordered not to take any action. With the very substantial numbers of new British rock bands arriving in the US, rock concert, maybe this is where the Americans' attraction for the accent originated from. Americans do seem to love the British accent, and many of people have often told me I sound like a Beatle, which is very, very insulting and discriminatory to suggest I sound like anyone that would ever come from Liverpool. They can't speak anything remotely to a human coherent language as far as I'm concerned, but judge for yourself by going and googling Scouse dialects and look at some videos. But these bands were arriving in the mass in the US, and then all of a sudden US mass bands started to saturate the radio waves with their psychedelic jingles and rhetorics. But these concerts became a fixture on the social calendar of American youth. In tandem with these concerts, the use of drugs among the youth rose in proportion to the devilish bedlam of discordant, heavy beat sounds numbed the minds of the listeners so that they were easily persuaded to try the new drug on the basis that everyone is doing it. Peer pressure is very strong, as is social validation, so they just went along with it, and the new culture received maximum coverage from the jackal media, which cost the conspirators not one single thin dime. So let's fast through that. You can have a little look because you kind of get in the pictures now. The youth of America and the Hollywood in crowd. Ed Sullivan was sent to England to become acquainted with the first Tavistock Institute rock group to hit the shores of the United States. Sullivan then returned to the United States to draft the strategy for the electronic media on how to package and sell the group without the full cooperation of the electronic media, and Ed Sullivan in particular. The Beatles and their music would have died on the vine instead of our national life, and the character of the United States was changed forever. Now that we know, it is all too clear how successful the Beatles' campaign to proliferate the use of drugs became. The fact the Beatles had their music and lyrics written from them was concealed. We read that. I think they were like just putting quotes in between. But back when Michael Jackson bought the Beatles' catalogue of songs, it belonged to the estate of Theodore Adorno, who owned most all their songs and lyrics because he wrote them. Adorno also wrote a lot of hits in the British invasion for bands, a number who were very famous and MK'd at the Tavistock Institute in London that created them as stars like the Beatles equals God, Good Cop, Stones, Bad Cop, and Images and Sounds. The Beatles, as most of us remember them at the beginning, Theodore Adorno was the brains behind the Beatles as he held the rights to the music, and eventually his estate sold those rights to Michael Jackson. Adorno, a classical musician, wrote their music, and it was all filtered down through MK's John, then Sir Falk Paul, who could not read a note of music. By the way, in fact, only half the real musician in the band was George Harrison. John was a poet who could strum a few chords, and Ringo a hack drummer at best. George often wondered if they why they never wanted to use his songs. So they had a fake Paul. That was something I mentioned, that there was a conspiracy that Sir Paul McCartney was died and he was replaced by a lookalike. The Beatles were introduced to the public as the means to spread youth culture, which led to the spreading of a new age culture, and this was all geared to setting up a nihilistic culture that we now live in today. That is all too present today, as I just said. Sorry, I should read all of it before I add my bits sometimes. But it is called Divide and Conquer, but this gets a whole lot different, and a Pandora's box, if you will, as things are not as they seem. So it does go on and on. Let's try and get through some of this about the Beatles for there. Again, if you do want to stop and pause some of that, you can. And as I said, this is getting a little long. We're still not even a quarter of the way through this article. So I'm thinking at some point in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I might stop recording this particular presentation and maybe save the rest of it for a second part. But similarly, Beatlemania hysteria was manufactured at JFK Airport. And JFK, very interesting there, because he was the individual that died, that created or sacrificed it, that created the crisis, the turmoil, the distress, and the disassociation. And when everyone was all sort of in that period of mourning and stuff, along come the Beatles. And in February of '64 at JFK Airport, when the Beatles arrived in the US to perform on Ned Sullivan, busloads of girls from a Bronx school were paid by Beatle promoters to scream hysterically when the Beatles got off the plane and throw their underwear at them and went into the terminal. That was all paid for and manufactured rent-a-crowd. It was a manufactured publicity stunt, and that's what we're saying. Was the JFK assassination a manufactured publicity stunt or psychological operation? One way or another, there are a lot of mysteries behind that, and the mystery behind the mystery is something we looked at yesterday that led us into today's Tavistock research. But it is paid off in priming the pump for the Ed Sullivan Show appearances, which did create a frenzied attitude among many American teenagers and set the stage for a looser rein on moral boundaries, and opened the door for kids from decent middle-class families to start using drugs, which is precisely what British intelligence, Tavistock, and the CIA had in mind all along. And George Martin, the fifth Beatle, as he was known, did all the orchestral arrangements with Adorno on the later Beatles and British bands they were assigned to. The Frankfurt School converged on the thesis that mass media could be used to induce regressive mental states, atomizing individuals, and producing increased liability. In other words, creating passively by fostering alienation, as in the teen rebel without a cause. James Dean, another Tavistock picture poster boy of juvenile delinquents, and in Blackboard Jungle, look at that, 1955, a year we do have to go and look at, and we'll be investigating maybe Friday. 50s on Friday, how does that sound? Let me know. But do you honestly think those two mass media movies that changed the entire Western Hemisphere were just products of Hollywood producers in the 50s? The word teenager wasn't even used, as we heard at that time, and youth culture was born in the 50s and then radically changed in the 60s by the psychedelic, as we've been looking about. And this was all part of the globalist agendas. Following the Tavistock Institute study of war psychosis and its breakdown of the individual personality, as Wolfe describes in Brainwashing, how the British used the media for mass psychological warfare. From that work, an evil thesis emerged. through the use of terror, man can be reduced to a childlike and submissive state in which his powers of reason are clouded and in which his emotional response to favorous stimulations and stimuli can become predictable, or in tavistock terms, profitable. By controlling the levels of anxiety, it is possible to induce a similar state in larger groups of people whose behavior can then be controlled and manipulated by the oligarchical, God, that's a struggle word. Oligarch is the word I'm looking for. Oligarchical, oh my goodness, you know what I'm trying to say. You can read it for yourself. But those, the oligarch forces from whom Tavistock worked. So at that point, I am actually going to take a break because my eyes are squinting. I do need to take a piss and I do need to smoke. And I do want to get a bite to eat. If or not we come back to this particularly article in this presentation or not will remain to be seen. But as I said, it is a giant, wide and deep wormhole when we are talking about Tavistock, and I wanted to kind of start out a little bit on the relevance of where we finished yesterday and how Kennedy's was the mark of the change of society. And as a result, after that, that's when we did see the introduction of the British invasion, psychedelics, beatniks, and all this stuff, the teenage revolutionary cult. So, as I said, we may or may not really commence momentarily with this presentation, or we may be heading back to the thrift store studio, or maybe looking at one last little shorter piece of reference information to Tavistock before we do return live as part of night 9, 2 weeks of tea, the TspTv 2-year anniversary celebration specials. Welcome back to the thrift store, and hopefully you enjoyed that little commercial break there, little teaser trailer for Saturday night's feature presentation, one of the most special presentations I think I will be bringing to you guys at the thrift store, and a little presentation I'm particularly excited about myself. And the purpose and intent of that little teaser was to try and get a little bit of excitement among you guys that may or may be watching live or even in retrospect. But if you're watching it after the 28th of November, then you will be watching in retrospect. But if you are watching in retrospect, go and find my special Star Wars Decoded feature, because it's probably the best episode I've ever made, although that is a future foresight at time of recording. Or maybe I have myself a time machine, all stuff that we have been talking about over the period of 2 weeks of tea. And for the penultimate night, I saved the special and possibly best till last, because Sunday night, hopefully we will be partying it up as best we can in true thrift store manner. But as tonight's presentation goes, let's get back into this little article about Tavistock, Laurel Canyon, and the CIA introduced hippie cult and craze and fad that was part of the destabilization of 1960s America, and was possibly the events that have kind of, or the start of the events that have led us to where we are in contemporary times, November 2020, where the shit just doesn't stop hitting the fan. Maybe not in huge dinosaur turd like fashions, but it is drip 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 diarrhea into a spray mist on society. But as I said, back to the article here that we were looking at earlier. So finishing to start where we finished, the Oloraks, who put together the Tavistock think tank, who introduced the British invasion. They created the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. They give the impression of choice, good boy, bad boy, yada yada, whoop-de-woo, ray tay tay. You should remember, because it wasn't that long ago at time of recording. But anyway, back into it. So we get the picture that the Tavistock introduced psychedelic phase and craze of the 60s worked exceptionally well. So back to it. You have alienated teenagers who never grows up, stuck in his own petty little world as plastic manufactured outcast who never grows up in non-stop Peter Pan syndrome arrested development. Now, I suffered that shit. I still suffer Peter Pan syndrome, and I've mentioned before Luke Skywalker syndrome, wanting to bring down the Galactic Empire single-handedly. But as I said, this was a little bit of part of the introduction of the progression of suspended adolescence, because up until sort of like the 50s and the 60s and even into the 70s, I was sort of an offspring of young parents. My mother was only 21 when she had me, and that was kind of the case sort of back then. If you were still on the shelf at 25 and you were female, you weren't married and had kids, you were considered over the hill. But my generation, the Gen Xers, we tended to sort of wait until we were in our 30s before we started to sort of settle down, get married, and have children. And we spent an awful lot of time in suspended adolescence playing video games. And, you know, the kids of the 80s that grew up watching all those Saturday morning cartoons, by the time they reached early adulthood in the 90s, they were then introduced to adult cartoons like The Simpsons and Family Guy, and then by the time of the millennium, we were introduced to reality TV, which gave us the perception that scripted, manufactured content passed off as reality could be perceived as reality. And back to Orson Welles, which we've already established was part of the Tavistock think tank mass manipulation, mind control methodology that was put into place. And it was also a little bit of an experiment of the mainstream media using a dramatized piece of fiction and passing it off as news, although they did allow put features in there that was a dramatization. They did announce it was actually real and it was a part of fiction. People, 25% of the 6 million people that tuned in believed it was real. But anyway, the alienated teen, suspended adolescence, that is stuff that I recognized in myself, and part of how I sort of deprogram myself is becoming aware of the symptoms and the situations around us. And some of you guys yesterday were talking in part 1 of Let's Talk Tavistock about how you loved the 60s music. And hopefully this little piece of information is going to show you how exactly it was designed to make you love it. And that changed your behavioral patterns to probably this day you still possess, as well as a lot of you being reprogrammed by your good old artificially intelligent handler that resides within your cell phone, that is now using these methods of mind control in your news feed in a series of memes and memetical rhetoricals. Anyway, so the Peter Pan syndrome, something I suffered from. Some of you guys may also feel the same. I don't know what the equivalent in feminine terms to the Peter Pan syndrome would be, but let me know in the comments. But that is the occult principle of ECI, the erotic crystallization inertia, meaning inertia is the resistance of any physical object to change in its state of notion, or motion rather, or rest or the tendency of an object to resist in any of its motion. Hope you understand that because I ain't explaining it. So the non-stop barrage of programming on people after WW2 with the radio, then TV, plus music through that technology was an assault on people, unaware they were being programmed and cloned. And important to remember that word clones. Star Wars special coming up Saturday night. We're going to talk exactly about the Clone Wars. And rebels cloned off, and even rebels who were feeling alienated from society had indeed been programmed in their own right to feel and behave in that manner. This is your mind control, your methodology right there. And I've always told you and spoke many times on this how fiction programs us one way or another, either with predictive program or with programmatics. And this is actually one of Tavistock's influence is on the mainstream entertainment industry, as well as the mainstream news industry, as well as the radio, the newspapers, the magazines. In fact, hopefully by now, if you're paying attention, and I hope you are paying attention and not just saying random stuff in the chat, hoping somebody will give you a little bit of attention for that random stuff. But still, this is important stuff to know, because Tavistock have their hand in each and every one of our life, and they are the result of how we are today. Share if you agree. You don't actually have to share and agree. That's just me being satirical again. But these are the sort of triggers that are used, and all these triggers and these words and these phrases that are introduced to society come from Tavistock. So the non-stop barrages, and as we said, their mainstream media are a form of mind control, and there is a very iconic image of the hippies putting the flowers in the rifles of the armed guards. I think that was the National Guard that were there to sort of oversee the goings on at the riots and rallies that were all Tavistock inspired and initiated during the 60s. All of that, everything that happened in the aftermath of Kennedy. This is what I'm saying. Kennedy was the incident, the event, the psyop that brought distress, distrust, and depressions and all this sort of stuff that will be the perfect symptoms for individuals to be then go through the process of mind control and then introduce psychedelics, music influences, and start repeating and bombarding that on the mainstream. All of a sudden people are behaving completely different and believing it is all of their own doing. But they're the birth of hard rock and roll and hippie movement, that's what we just looked at, that little picture. But from there, the Stanford Research Institute, aided and abetted by the Tavistock Institute, introduced the rock and roll hippie culture movement to counter the anti-war activists who were disrupting political life and financial expansion of the wealthy elite. Dave McGowan was a criminal investigator when in 2007 he turned his focus on Laurel Canyon, and Laurel Canyon is the United States Tavistock, and Laurel Canyon is an extension of Tavistock. And why so many rock stars of the day, the Doors, the Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, all became known worldwide out of this little one canyon, same canyon that also brought us Charlie Manson. But anyway, Laurel Canyon, we will have to possibly look at this at some point as a follow-up to Tavistock, because Laurel Canyon is another one of those institutes that we need to pay a lot of attention to into the way society is structured and behaves. But Weird Scenes in Laurel Canyon is a must-read by all, and some of you may recall the lyrics from Jim Morrison's classic This Is the End. Weird scenes inside the gold mine. All the children are insane, waiting for the summer rain. Anyway, I was a big fan of Mamas and Papas, of Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix. Didn't really like the the Beatles at all. Was into the Stones, but that sort of West Coast hippie surf sound as well. Jan and Dean, the Beach Boys in particular are a band that I'm very, very fond of. But it is the first week of August in 1964, and the U.S. warships under command of the U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison, good old Jim's dad, I believe, have allegedly come under attack while patrolling Vietnam's Tonkin Gulf. This event, subsequently dubbed the Tonkin Gulf Incident, will result in immediate passing by the US Congress of the obviously pre-drafted Tonkin Gulf Resolution, problem, reaction, solution. So they had the solution, they created the problem at the Tonkin Gulf Incident, and then the reaction was, let's go to war, let's get those damn bastard Viet Cong. But anyway, and thus, as a result, the bloody Vietnam War quagmire begun. But before it is over, well over 50,000 American bodies, along with literally millions of Southeast Asian bodies, will litter the battlefields of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Quite a dent in the depopulation agenda there, right? But one of the earliest on the Laurel Canyon Sunset Strip is good old Jim Morrison, the enigmatic lead singer of The Doors. Come on, baby, light my fire. Although he didn't actually write that song. One of The Doors' more popular tracks was actually written by the drummer or guitarist, I can't remember which, Robbie Krieger. Wrote that because he thought, as soon as I'm hanging out with you, Jim, I should write about fires and snakes and stuff, and thus become their most popular track, or one of them. I also liked LA Woman, and of course a classic, Riders on the Storm. What a tune. But anyway, all of that sadly was a lab-based generated, designed exactly to make us love us and behave in the sort of ways. And I did have a little bit of a Jim Morrison phase in my early 20s when I did sort of start getting quite into the drug scene. By then, just the harmless puffing of a bong at the weekend has sort of been replaced with the taking of psychedelics on Monday mornings, just to get through the day while the rest of the world was going to work. But I did have a little bit of a Jim Morrison phase of my life, as probably many people that were influenced by that Laurel Canyon created psychedelic cult phase from the 60s that still is very, very popular, and some of those tunes really do stand the test of time, unlike some of today's garbage and mumble rap shit that people listen to, but again, all part of the design. But one of the earliest was Jim Morrison, the lead singer of The Doors. Jim will quickly become one of the most iconic, controversial, critically acclaimed, and influential figures to tape up residents in Laurel Canyon. Curiously enough, the self-proclaimed Lizard King has another claim to fame as well, albeit that one of his numerous chronicles will feel is of much relevance to his career as the possible untimely death. He is a son, as he turns out, of the aforementioned Admiral George Stephen Morrison. In his death, and again, the Club 27, something happens to like Britney Spears, Amanda Bynes, I think even Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian, all these kind of MK Ultra Monarch clones that have been brainwashed and mind controlled by their handlers usually have a meltdown around 27. I believe back in the 60s, why so many of these pop stars did pass away at 27. Look up, we might even do a Club 27 special at some point. Let me know if you want to see that. But Club 27 is James Dean. He was another one, Jimi Hendrix, I think, but a lot of guys, Kurt Cobain, another. All of these famous people all died at the age of 27, and 27 is a little bit infamy, I believe, or infamous with gematria and symbology and numerology and stuff like that. But I believe, like, you know, rather than reprogram back then in maybe the earlier days of Monarch and MK Ultra, there were glitches and side effects, and sort of once they served their purpose, then they were surplus to requirements. That's why they ended up dead in bathtubs or dying eating a sandwich on the toilet, as I think was the case with Mama Cass, which was very similar to how Elvis went out, funny enough. But anyway, he was the son of U.S. military, and I believe also Stephen Morrison was a CIA agent eventually at some point in his time. And so it is that even while the father is actively conspiring to fabricate an incident that will be used to massively accelerate an illegal war, the son is positioning himself as the ultimate icon of the hippie and anti-war crowd. Nothing unusual about that, although there is a little bit of a myth in urban legend about the vicar's daughter, that usually she is the wildest in the sack. And I did actually sleep with a vicar's daughter once, and she was pretty wild in the sack. But anyway, I digress by giving some of my personal conquests of younger yesteryear away there. But anyway, you know, a small world and all that, as the saying goes. What are the chances, what are the odds that the leading hippie icon of the decade's father was also a leading general within the US military structure and leading attacks on innocent people in Southeast Asia? And I always did want to go to Vietnam, and partly to drive around, not drive around, fly around in a Huey, shooting an M60 while listening to the Doors, while napalming paddy fields. Very unwholesome reason to want to go to Vietnam for. But a lot of those movies and stuff at the time, this is something sort of people joked about in terms of wars. Vietnam had the fucking best soundtrack. But anyway, one of the earliest on the Laurel oh, we got all that. So I'm reading that, excuse me. So I don't think there's that much to go, but there is quite a bit still to get through on this. But as we've oh god, I can't speak now. As we've established that Jim Morrison had a connection to military agencies and government agencies. And it is we read that as well. So there's something from Frank Zappa that I can't possibly read. Let me see if I can zoom it in a little bit more for you. Still can't read it. That's very difficult. My eyes are a little bit squinty, but maybe those of you with better eyes will be able to read it. But let's get back to it. Nothing unusual about that, I suppose. It's a small world, and that is not as if Jim Morrison's story is in any way unique. No, because quite a lot of those hippie crooners, as we mentioned, did have family ties to governmental and military agencies. Making up half of the Laurel Canyon's first family is Frank's wife, Gail Zappa, known formerly as Adelaide Sloatman. Gail hails from a long line of career naval officers, including her father, who spent his life working on classified nuclear weapons research for the US Navy. Gail herself had once worked as a secretary for the Office of Naval Research and Development. She also once told an interviewer that she had heard voices all her life. Many years before they nearly simultaneously arrived on the Laurel Canyon scene, Gail had attended a naval kindergarten with Mr. Mojo Rising himself. And those of you who don't know, Mr. Mojo Rising is an anagram of Jim Morrison. And she claimed that as children, Gail once hit Jim over the head with a hammer. The very same Jim Morrison had later attended the same Alexandria, Virginia high school as two other future Laurel Canyon luminaries, John Phillip and Cass Elliot. And Cass Elliot was Mama Cass. Papa John Phillips, more so than probably any other of the illustrious residents of Laurel Canyon, will play a major role in spreading the emerging youth counterculture across America. His contribution will be twofold. First, he will co-organize, along with Manson associate Terry Melcher, the famed Monterey Pop Festival, which, though unprecedented media exposure, will give the mainstream America its first real look at the music and fashions of the recent hippie movement. So it's like a little bit used as a psychological operation, a propaganda device, and a tool to inspire those that hadn't been caught into the hippie culture to follow along. Because look what fun it is: drugs and good music and people running around half naked, free love in fields. And Monterey was the kind of precursor to Woodstock. But anyway, that was all inspired by him. Give America its first taste at, and real look at what was going on with the hippie movement. Secondly, Phillips will pen an inspired song known as San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair. Wonderful, wonderful melodic tune there with some wonderful harmonies that only the mamas and papas seemed to be able to achieve, which will, again, this was why it was hypnotic, which will quickly rise to the top of the charts. Along with the Monterey Pop Festival, the song will be instrumental in luring the disenfranchised, a preponderance of whom are underage runaways, to San Francisco to create the High Ashbury phenomenon and the famed 67 Summer of Love, y'all. If I had a time machine, that's where I'm going. Although there would be the downside that chicks back then did have 60s bush. They didn't practice pubic trimming or grooming in those days, unfortunately, which was often the case in Eastern Europe during the 1980s on some of my backpacking travels. But anyway, let's move on to yet another one of the Laurel Canyon's earliest and brightest stars, Mr. Stephen Stills. Stills will have the distinction of being a founder member of two Laurel Canyon's most acclaimed and beloved bands, Buffalo Springfield and, needless to say, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. In addition, Stills will pen the first and certainly one of the most enduring anthems of the 60s generation, For What It's Worth, the opening lines of which appear at the top of this post. Stills' follows-up single will be entitled Bluebird. Project Bluebird, Project Blue Book, Blue Beam, all of these things have links and ties to governmental agencies, which, as we see in here, which can coincidentally or not happens to be the original code name assigned to the MK Ultra program, and why can't I say coincidence? Coincidentally, it is also the symbol of Twitter. The bluebird is this Twitter. Is that an example of your MK Ultra Monarch program in social media form in better deliverance than that? I really don't know, but there you go. That is a prime example for you right there. But before his arrival in Laurel Canyon, Stills was, yawn, the product of yet another career military family raised partly in Texas. Young Stephen spent large swaths of his childhood in El Salvador, Costa Rica, and the Panama Canal Zone, an area of the world where you might be able to find Contra rebels and mercenaries for hire. In fact, that is a hotbed for that kind of activity over there in Korea, military career families and personnel that might be spending a lot of time in those countries might be doing some clandestine black op work there. Share if you agree. Copy and paste the bunny, guys. You don't have to do any of that. It is satirical. I'm not trying to trigger you. I'm just pointing out that that is the narrative of contemporary mind washing and mind control and brainwashing methodology, getting you to behave on command to the desired command within the trigger message. But as I said, he spent a lot of time down in Central America alongside his father, who was, we can fairly be certain, helping to spread democracy to the unwashed masses, as I just was saying there. In fact, that endearingly American way. As with the rest of our cast of characters, Stills was educated primarily at schools on military bases and at elite military academies. Among his contemporaries in Laurel Canyon, he was widely viewed as having an abrasive, authoritarian personality. Nothing unusual about any of that, of course, as we have already seen with the rest of the cast of characters. Before arriving in Laurel Canyon and opening the doors of his home to the soon-be famous, the allegedly famous, and the infamous, such as the aforementioned Charlie Manson, whose family also spent time at the log cabin and at the Laurel Canyon home of Mama Cass Elliott, which, in case you didn't know, sat right across the street from the Laurel Canyon home of Abigail Folger and Wojtek Tarkovsky. Let us not get ahead of ourselves here, but John Edmund Andrew Phillips was shockingly enough yet another child of the military intelligence complex, the son of US Marine Corps Captain Claude Andrew Phillips and mother who claimed to have psychic and telekinetic powers. John attended a series of elite military prep schools in Washington, D.C. area, accumulating in an appointment to the prestigious U.S. Naval Academy. Now, Mama Cass and what's his name, Phillips here, they were like, you know, the mamas and the papas, and mamas and papas are something that are given to names of handlers, particularly when they are dealing with young children in regards to MK Ultra and looking at Montauk in Stranger Things, you know, the real life Stranger Things, and the character 11. She was a product of child experimentation, born into a lab, raised for experimentation, and she had telekinesis powers. And here we have sort of somebody in real life that had an offspring. This is the offspring of a parent who had those telekinesis powers. Monarch programming isn't just about the mind control, it's about memories and behavior patterns passed down through DNA into our offspring. And again, this is all very, very important to retain and understand, guys. If or not you are retaining and understanding it, I am doing my best to try to. So basically, you know, once we get programmed to behave away, that programming becomes part of our DNA. And then when we then have offspring, if we have offspring, again or not, but I'm using this example, when we pass, we will then pass down that programming via our DNA into our offspring. And this is what manipulation of the masses is all about. And this is why these movements and music and stuff like this, because there's a good chance that some of you guys who listened to the 60s type music as teenagers in the 60s may have introduced that music to your children while they were growing up, who then introduced it to their children, and thus the messaging and the programming will retain within that music and will be picked up. That's kind of why, you know, I said I lived a little bit out of time. Even though I grew up in the 80s, liking a lot of the 80s music, I did primarily listen more to 60s music. So the mamas and the papas, as I said, were they the head handlers, and that's why they invited and opened up their home up there in Laurel Canyon to the likes of all these individuals to act as their handlers and to program them. Charlie Manson and the Manson family, we probably will have to go onto, as I said, we really are going to be going off, and while I'm kind of doing this is we're finishing up a little bit with Tavistock, although that wormhole, as I said, is fucking massive. We could spend an eternity just doing episodes on the Tavistock Institute's influence over mankind and manipulating of the masses with a mere series of methodology and laboratories and organizations that are designed solely to change the way we behave. But as I said, we are going to sort of try and lead this into a future Laurel Canyon feature, although I doubt we will be seeing that as any part of 2 weeks of tea, but that might be something we will recommence with once the celebrationary 2-year anniversary events are done and dusted, and we get back to a little bit of normality and maybe some new scheduling and regularity at the thrift store. But anyway, another of those icons, let's get back to this article, and one of Laurel Canyon's most flamboyant residents is a young man by the name of David Cosby. So hopefully you're seeing now that nearly all of these individuals that were the superstars of the time, the hippie cult, all come from military families rather. But David Cosby, the founding member of the seminal Laurel Canyon band The Byrds, as well of course of Cosby, Stills and Nash, is not surprisingly the son of an Annapolis graduate on WW2 military intelligence officer Major Floyd Delafield. Cosby, like others in this story, Floyd spent most of his post-service time traveling the world. Those travels landed him in places like Haiti, where he paid a visit in 1927 when the country just happened to be coincidentally, of course, under military occupation by the U.S. Marines. One of the Marines doing that occupying was a guy that we met earlier by the name of Claude Andrew Phillips. But David Crosby is much more than just the son of Major Floyd Delafield Crosby. David Van Cordant Crosby, as it turns out, is the scion of a closely entwined Van Corladant, Van Schuler, and Van Resenler families. And while you're probably thinking the Van Who families, I can assure you that if you plug those names in over at Wikipedia, you can spend a pretty fair amount of time reading up on the power wielded by this clan for the last 2.25 centuries or so. So you can do that for yourself, or maybe we can look it up at another point, future content perhaps, because we don't want to get too off topic and away from this already prolonged presentation. But hopefully you are enjoying it, guys. A little bit of historical information as well as relevant information to how the powers to be can use mass manipulation methods on society, and how you and I and everyone around us has indeed been influenced and controlled and manipulated to behave the way we do so. So where are we? You can see for the last 2.25 centuries just how much power those people have. But the Crosby family tree includes a truly dizzying array of U.S. senators and congressmen, state senators and assemblymen, governors, mayors, judges, Supreme Court justices, Revolutionary and Civil War generals, signers of Declaration of Independence, and members of the Continental Congress. It also includes, I should hasten to add, for those of you with a taste for such things, more than a few high-ranking Masons. See Stephen Van Rensselaer, for example, reportedly served as a Grand Master of Masons for New York, and is, if that isn't impressive enough, according to the New England Genealogical Society, David Van Cortlandt Crosby is also a direct descendant of Founding Fathers and Federalist Papers author Alexander Hamilton and John Jay. Quite the family tree, I think you agree. Another shining star, and would be later singer-songwriter Jackson Browne, who is, are you getting as bored with this as I am, the product of a career family. Brown's father was assigned to post-war reconstruction work in Germany, which very likely means he was there as part of mass manipulation in ideology, behavioral changing experiments and stuff like that, tactics, which very likely means he was in the employ of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, and readers in my Understanding the F Word may recall the US involvement in post-war reconstruction in Germany largely consisted of maintaining as much of the Nazi infrastructure as possible while shielding war criminals from capture and prosecution. Operation Paperclip, folks. Against that backdrop, Jackson Browne was born in a military hospital in Heidelberg, Germany. With 2 decades later, he emerged as, never mind, you get in the picture. Let's instead talk about 3 other Laurel Canyon vocalists who will rise to dizzying heights of fame and fortune: Gary Buckley, Dan Peek, and Dewey Banau. Individually, these 3 names are probably unknown to virtually all readers, but collectively, as the band America, these 3 will score huge hits in the early 70s with such songs as Ventura Highway, A Horse with No Name, and the Wizard of Oz themed The Tin Man in Went Through the Desert with a Horse with No Name. I guess I can probably don't need to add that all 3 of these lads were the products of, what do you know, military intelligence communities. Berkeley's dad was a commander of the now defunct Ruslip, USA Air Force Base near London, England. A facility deeply immersed in intelligence operation. Burnell's and Peake's fathers were both career Air Force officers serving under Berkeley's dad at West Ruslip in the UK there. and that's where the three boys meet. Let's also discuss Mike Namesmith of the Hey Hey with the Monkees, the American cloned version of the Beatles. It also didn't write their own songs, just like the Beatles. They never wrote their own songs. The Beatles and the Monkees are exact clones, and they were the NSYNC of the time, I guess. The Backstreet Boys, whatever you want, New Kids on the Block, Suck a Lock a Cock. All of those kind of manufactured boy bands were the product of Laurel Canyon, and the Monkees and the Beatles were archetypes of that format. But as I said, the Monkees, two more of the highly successful Laurel Canyon bands who both arrived in LA not long after serving time with the US Air Force. Nesmith was also inherited a family fortune estimated at $25 million. Graham Parsons, who would briefly replace David Crosby in The Byrds before fronting the Flying Burrito Brothers, was the son of Major Cecil Ingram, Coondog Connor II, a decorated military officer and bomber pilot who reportedly flew over 50 combat missions. Parsons was also on height on his mother's side to the formidable Snively family fortune. Said to be the wealthiest family in the exclusive enclave of Winter Haven, Florida, the Snively family was the proud owner of Snively Groves Inc., which reportedly owned as much as 1/3 of all citrus groves in the state. And so it goes on. As one scrolls through the roster of Laurel Canyon superstars, what one finds more often than not is the sons and daughters of the military intelligence complex and sons and daughters of extreme wealth and privilege. And oftentimes, you'll find both rolled into one convenient package. Every once in a while, you will also stumble across a former child actor, like the above-mentioned Brandon D. Wild or Mickey Dolenez, or eccentric prodigy Van Dyke Parks. You might also encounter some former mental patients, such as James Taylor. I like James Taylor as well. Who spent a lot of time in two different mental institutions in Massachusetts before hitting the Laurel Canyon scene. Or Larry Wildman Fisher, who was institutionalized repeatedly during his teen years, once for attacking his mother with a knife, an act that gleefully mocked by Frank Zappa on the cover of Fisher's first album. Finally, you might find the offspring of an organized crime figure like Warren Zevon, the son of Stumpy Zevon, a lieutenant in the famous LA crime lord Mickey Cohen. So that, guys, is it, or that is where we will end it here, because there is an awful lot more to go, and we still aren't exactly halfway through this presentation. If or not we will conclude it or not remains to be seen. But as I said, I do want to try and wrap this up, just because time is getting ahead, and it has been a very, very long presentation, and it has extended already into 2 parts. But hopefully these 2 parts have been very, very interesting. And I actually found out today that somebody shared part 1. I got a notification that I've never gotten before to let me know that somebody shared my video. My goodness, will the wonders never cease? We have seen a few little milestones achieved in the series of 2 weeks of T special nightly streams starting at 9 p.m. Eastern every night up until the 29th of November. Although Saturday and Sunday times are to be determined, we may go on a little earlier than normal in those cases, due to the fact that there is the penultimate and the final finale to 2 weeks of T. But it's not going to be the end of TspTv. No, we will be recommencing and hopefully coming out a little bit newly and improved, different format and different scheduling styles. And hopefully part and parcel of this 2 weeks of T series was trying to introduce you to a little bit of how I kind of do want to start formatting these live streams, and hopefully you guys are enjoying them. So that is a little bit about Tavistock, the Beatles, Laurel Canyon, and how they created and introduced the 60s psychedelic hippie movement to society and how it was part of a mass mind control manipulation operation that worked to a T. See what I did there? Put T on the word. So anyway, guys, let's head over now back to the thrift store studio, and we will recommence with live proceedings, and let's see what you guys had to say or have to think on what we have just seen in one of the longest presentations I think we've seen as a part of 2 weeks of T special live streams, and I actually think it is the longest so far. Anyway, see you soon, guys.
Ha ha ha!
Welcome back. So that was tonight's presentation. It was a long one. So thanks for you guys who did stick with it for the duration and hopefully enjoyed that. And maybe you might have noticed that we had a couple of commercial breaks during that presentation. I thought I'd try and pimp some of my future content to you, although nobody seemed to react to it, which was a little bit of a disappointment. Although I'm almost certain now Nancy is going to say, oh, they were great, T, hashtag Shah, some random emojis. But anyway, some little teasers for future content on TspTv. So let me get the thing down and the camera back on, and we can start chatting. The other thing, we do got a brand new and approved outro for you tonight. So intros, outros, commercials, presentations, and who was it that said Professor T? I think that was Shawnee. I like the sound of that. Should we rebrand to the Thrift Store Professor? I do like the way that sounds. Professor X. Look, I'm bald like Professor X. I've got to shave my head tomorrow. Actually, it's getting a little bit long. Something I don't often do is take my hat off for you guys. A little bit of a teaser of what's underneath, and that is why I wear a hat. I don't really like the fact that I don't have hair, although I'm not vain. I don't know, feel conscious about it. So that is why the hat. But Professor X, he was bald, as was a Silver Surfer. So thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed that. As I said, it was a little bit long, and it sort of started with a interesting New York Post little documentary there where they showed you a little bit around 1967 and the hippie craze and what was going on in that time. And all of those individuals that you saw there congregated together, free love, doing LSD and stuff, had been manipulated and mind controlled into behaving that way, courtesy of Tavistock. And you and I have also been influenced and programmed by Tavistock one way or another. So thank you guys. I'm glad you are enjoying it, and we do seem to be getting a few more people watching in the live chats. It's saying we've got 17 now, so it wasn't very long ago that we struggled to get 5 or 6 people. Welcome, Kelly. Better late than never, as they said, my sweet. And maybe you did dodge a little bit of a bullet in the fact that we did watch quite a long presentation, and it was a lot of me reading. Now they do get quite hard to read because I kind of read it on my phone, and after a while it does get small and squinty, so some of the stuff gets a little bit of a blur, which is why sometimes when they get a little bit long I do sort of get a little bit lost in my following of what I'm reading. But I'm trying to make it as entertaining and visual for you, so it's not just me talking. Again, putting these presentations together, sometimes I've had ideas for topics in the night, and you know, guys that have been watching along, I can pull out a 7-hour and show from my ass without a script, without a plot, without a presentation, without anything, and manage to talk and entertain you. But I like the fact that I can sort of structure a little bit more like this, and sort of I can pay attention to what I'm saying in the presentation as much as I can pay attention to what you are saying in the chat. It also gives me the ability to go out and have a quick smoke, maybe have a drink, or a Jimmy Riddle, which is rhyming slang for piddle, which is rhyming slang for a piss, or not necessarily rhyming slang for piss, but slang for a piss. So most of you guys think it was interesting. So as I said, that is your introduction to Tavistock. That is why and you know, Martha was saying in the chat earlier that she loved the Beatles. Well, we were programmed to love them because that was their purpose and prime objective, was to get us to love them and to get us to pave. And how we saw that the Rolling Stones were the flip side of that coin. You know, the sort of Beatles were the sort of guy that you would take home to mum and probably marry, but the Rolling Stones were the guys that you really wanted to fuck. And you know exactly what I'm saying, ladies. In what I mean by that, they were the bad boy, you know, shirtless sort of types, just like Jim Morrison. You know, he's an incredibly sexual man, and I'm saying that in the most heterosexual way, but he was there, you know, to titillate the not just the ears, but the sights and the senses. And I'm pretty sure some of you ladies will agree. He was a very good looking gentleman, to say the least. But the Beatles, they're all fucking butt ugly. There wasn't a handsome one among them, really, if you ask me. And you know, none of them could string a note together. None of them could write a song. John was a fucking pretentious up his own ass poet that couldn't really write stuff until they got a famous composer, and the only one with any talent was poor old George Harrison. So anyway, Martha went to a Stones concert. I bet that was quite exciting, Martha, especially in the 70s. I always wanted to sort of go back in time in that, sort of see concerts. That was something I always wanted time travel for. You know, go to Woodstock, go to Pink Floyd when the wall come down in Berlin. They did a special concert there. So we have, I just was saying now, we've got a few more people watching. We were up to 17, so we're down to 13 now. So I do appreciate it. Is the eve of Thanksgiving for you guys that are south of the border. Did I say hello to you, ATN? If I did or didn't, forgive me, but welcome again. Woodstock didn't happen. That's an interesting theory. Explain more. I'd like to hear some stuff on that. But something I mentioned in the chat there, you know, at Woodstock, one of the iconic moments, maybe the most iconic, was Jimi Hendrix and his rendition of the United States anthem. And he did it to a field of washed up hippies that were high on drugs, that were covered in mud and fecal matter and ejaculate because they'd been free loving it and high off their tits for the duration. And this really was the symbolization of the destabilization of America. And what was introduced in 1964 rather only took 3 years to get to that state. And those tactics, you know, it was, I don't know who it was that mentioned it was a test run. It wasn't a test run. That was the beginning of the end. And Devil's Meek mentioned the Doors' famous track there at the end. This is the end. Right, I'm not going to go into it because, as you've already established from that presentation, I can't sing for shit, but I could get myself an auto-tune application from the Play Store. They do exist, and I could get myself a rap generator. Now, with regards of what we just looked and saw about how these very, very famous, influential artists of their time were manufactured and designed in their purpose to deliver a message, not only a message, but to deliver us into a behavioral patterns and trends that may or may not been of our desire prior to that introduction. In recent weeks, in fact, the last sort of few months, I've seen this character being shared and circulated a lot by people. Certainly some of the guys that I met in individuals I met as a result of going down to the Toronto lockdown process and cut you out there. And he's a guy, I think his name's Don or Tom McDonald, and he's a rapper. And I saw, like, on one day, you know, same with the copy and paste the bunny shit, I seen people sharing this guy's video all over and up in my news feed. And again, that's probably targeted because they think, you know, oh, this guy likes conspiracies and truth, or maybe he'll like this fucking Laurel Canyon manufactured truth rapper. And he come with a lot of clickbaity sort of articles. Oh, he's the most hated rapper in the world and you've never heard of him. And that's kind of the 99% of you won't share kind of rhetoric that kind of triggers you into wanting to know, well, if he's the most hated rapper, I've got to watch him. And I listened to about 30 seconds of his one of his songs just to see what he was about. And honest to God, it was just like the Beatles. It was fucking generated shit. and he was supposed to be controversial, talking about the truth and delivering the message. And why I'm bringing this up, because the conspiracy theorist subculture, I'm part of it, you guys are part of it, and some of you love the Beatles also say you love a good conspiracy. And this was our programming, ladies and gentlemen. We all kind of in this stream of confessed and admitted our love for many of the bands and artists that we saw in that presentation. And many of us all are a little bit anti-government, although not so many of you. Some of you do quite like Donald Trump, but maybe that is your own individual piece of programming. And this is what I'm trying to say, that if they can program us to love shit bands like the Beatles and make us think that they're the most revolutionary thing to happen to music, when really they're not, they were just a manufactured product placement, and anyone could have been the Beatles, really and truly, and they could have probably picked a lot better looking people, in my opinion. But never mind, some of you ladies back then did think they were cute and did like them because they sounded different. And there you go. Well, you know, Martha, I was chatting a little bit through that we were talking about, you know, maybe Cali Ninja, he put some information about Club 27 in the TSP Clubhouse. And that's a little bit why I've kind of rebranded it, because I'd like for us guys to maybe collaborate and work together on future presentations in Club 27. There's quite a few of us were mentioning it there. Happy Mama, you mentioned a few people. Well, we've got Discord, we've got the Facebook. Maybe you guys can go and do a little bit of research, and that's kind of what I want to get, or a little bit of an added bonus, I guess. You know, I'm not trying to control you or make you do things against your wills, but it'd be nice that some of this information that that I'm sharing with you might encourage you to do a little bit of further research. And you know, I like the fact that Cali Ninja went off and found some research on topic and shared that with the guys in the thrift store. Brilliant. That is exactly sort of, you know, the unseen added bonus, but secretly, you know, that would be a little bit too much to hope for, but it happened a little bit organically. And again, the Club 27 thing, why don't we share some information? If you want, I can put the presentation together, say, okay, so here's an article that Happy Mama shared with me on Discord for, you know, on the topic of 27. This is something Devil Speak told me about the numerology and the symbolism behind 27. This is something Crying Hippy found me, or this is something Cali Ninja pointed out, or maybe, you know, your favorite conspiracy, Martha, you could say, yeah, you know, I'm really into Oklahoma City bombing. Do you want to work with me, T? Or this is stuff that I've looked at on my, you know, I've looked at on my own. I've researched this stuff. I'm not saying you are a fan of Oklahoma City, and it's kind of weird to sort of say what's your favorite conspiracy, because they're also very dystopian and tyrannical in my nanical. It's really sort of, you know, sort of sadistic to say that you would have a favorite, but you know, I have some conspiracies like 9/11, like MK Ultra, like Blue Beam, and like Tavistock, that I do kind of, sort of sounds wrong, but enjoy researching and looking into. And as you said, Martha, you're a conspiracy theorist, so whatever your conspiracy of choice is, there you go, there's a good terminology for it. Why don't you drop me some information on that, and maybe we can do a future presentation. If not, we can get the phone up and running. You can come on and be a guest presenter, that way you won't have to read. But anyway, that is a little bit what I want to try and do, get some of you guys involved in it. But as I said, through this 2 weeks, I've been a little bit preoccupied and a little bit busy putting all this stuff together. But before I get off what I was trying to say about the conspiracy theorist, the tinfoil hat, that was a phrase coined by the Laurel Canyon CIA think tank at the time, because people did start to question the Kennedy sort of assassination back there. And this is kind of almost like when conspiracy theorists started to come out of the woodwork. But what I'm suggesting is this our programming? Were we programmed to be you know, conspiracy theorists? And is the material that we research and spend hours and hours in these rabbit holes looking at, is that our program of distraction? You know, we keeps us busy and occupied doing that. Why we ain't doing anything else? And again, that kind of, the conspiracy theorists sort of spawned out of that kind of flower child era, and is a sort of subculture. It does have certain, you know, behavioral patterns to it and similarities. People in basements, people that have been incarcerated or institutionalized one way or another, do tend to be a little anti-governmental. But you know, is this our programming, and is it, you know, was that a designed subculture of of Laurel Canyon and of Tavistock in order to put us in a little field of our own in the human farm. Yeah, well, that's it. Let's get yourselves thinking. And again, this is part of why I'm sort of trying to share this sort of stuff with you as well. So, you can start seeing it for yourself. And maybe, I understand how I've been programmed. And, I'm not denying it. This is what they did to me. And if you kind of realize that they've done it to you too, then you do stand a little bit of chance of maybe regaining a little bit of control over your reality. But anyway, as I said, guys, that was tonight's presentation. That was some stuff I wanted to share with you on Tavistock. We probably in the future will do a Tavistock Revisited episode. As for the rest of the week, it is Thanksgiving tomorrow, so if or not you did catch that commercial at the end of that, we will be doing a Knowing T, Knowing You special. So there's not going to be a presentation tomorrow. That may or may not disappoint you. I thought, as it's Thanksgiving, let's get a little bit away from the secret societies, doom and gloom, conspiracies against mankind and humanity, and maybe just have a little bit of a free for all. We can now not consent, and this is it. Many people were unaware, and this is what I say. The 60s people were unaware that this movement was a form of manipulation. Societal behavioural changes resulted of that manipulation. Mal Hardy, my darling. It wouldn't have been TSP. That was a special hug for you, by the way, if you don't know. But as I know, you're one of my sort of star pupils and little prodigy of the Thrift Crew or Thrift Tribe. Did anyone like the idea of Thrift Tribe? Share if you agree. 99% won't. But always good to see you, Mal. And a lot of these kind of presentations in the last few weeks have not necessarily been designed by you, but sort of your enthusiasm for my MK Ultra stuff kind of was a little bit of a kickstart I needed to get my ass in gear. So thank you, Mal, as always. Well, I'm glad you watch in retrospect, but Sunday night, darling, please mark a note in your calendar. It is the 2nd birthday of TspTv, and what exactly I am going to be doing in that, still don't know. And the other reason sort of we're doing a Knowing T, Knowing You tomorrow, because it will give me a little bit of a break from sort of having to meet deadlines to put these productions together, although it's not really a hardship. Time does get away from me a little bit, but it's given me a purpose, and it is something I am enjoying doing, and I think maybe slowly and surely getting a little bit better at doing it. So as I said, guys, we did have a couple of commercials. Please somebody give me some comment on my little Star Wars intro teaser trailer I give you there for Star Wars Decoded, which will be Saturday night. So the weekend I'm trying to level it up, what they say about sort of networks and stuff. Sort of Monday, Tuesday they may not put the best shows on, but they save the best shows for the weekend. That's a little bit what I'm doing. We may be starting earlier than 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturday and Sunday, but I'm planning maybe the next couple of nights we are going to wing it. So as I said, I did want to give you a little teaser trailer in this episode, and that might be something I start doing in these presentations as well, sort of give a break between the reading and sort of a space between some of the features of those presentations is little teasers for future content. So again, give myself a couple of days break. I want to get some stuff together for the Star Wars special on Saturday night, and some stuff together for Sunday, so I don't have to worry about getting anything up tomorrow night or Friday night. Something I am going to probably try and do maybe even tomorrow night after the show. I do have my Reality Decoded 1985 director's cut specials, 4 hours and 20 minutes long. Now it will play live, but due to some of the stuff that is copyrighted, it will be censored temporarily by YouTube, and you won't be able to watch it in repeat because it will be blocked, but we can watch it live. And funny enough, Almel and Nancy, I think, were the only two people that watched. Actually, no, it wasn't. That was a different stream that ended abruptly due to some algorithmic behavior. But a little while ago, Nancy, you sat and watched my director's cut. There was only two of us. That was 4 hours and 20 minutes long. So I might not necessarily do this part of the live show, but when I finish the live show, I might set up the stream and just leave my fiction decoded 4 hour and 20 minute special of channel surfing late night TV in 1985, because there are some damn disturbing revelations and secrets hidden within some of our very, very favorite and popular cartoons, just like there was stuff hidden within our favorite and popular bands, but the movies, the TV shows, and even some of the sort of documentaries and stuff that will reveal some stark secrets and very disturbing methodology of how our minds have been manipulated and controlled for a lot longer than we really care to realize. Hello there, Kaz, how are you, darling? There's a little Northern Englander welcoming to the thrift store. That's my northern accent. That's how they sound up in Manchester. So glad to see you on your way to work, are you, darling? And sorry, there was a little bit of a... That was just for Kaz. She knows what I'm meaning. That's lost on the Yanks. Kaz, my darling. So anyway, thank you, Elmel. I'm glad that you've learned a lot. And it's a little bit of the aim is to hope to get you guys to learn. So it has been really, really kind of uplifting, I guess, and sort of a little bit rewarding in the sense that you are enjoying these shows. We are getting people tuning up every single day. We have found some new Thrift Tribe members, such as Devil, such as Happy Mama, if she's still here, like War Fist. He's not around. So welcome. The tribe is growing slowly and surely, but we've got 8 minutes till the 3 hour mark. So we will be wrapping this up very, very shortly. I'm a little bit dry, need another drink, need another smoke. So Tavistock, guys, last thoughts and opinions before we do sign out. Is there anything from tonight or yesterday that you particularly found of interest? Is there anything like or anything we saw that you want to develop or research more? So we will be probably looking at this outside of the 2 weeks of tea celebrations. As I said, we are getting into that celebration weekend. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. I'm going to try and do something a little bit special in Thanksgiving-y there. And if or not, we might be able to wing a tea's company where we get a special guest presenter or caller. That may or may not happen. Don't want to promise that yet, but again, tomorrow, knowing T, knowing you, will start at 9 p.m. That was the little commercial teaser trailer we saw at the end of that presentation. And don't forget, Saturday, the Star Wars Decoded special. That's probably going to be longer than this, guys, so that's why we might be starting earlier, but it is the weekend, so we might be going on longer. Just need to make sure the phone is charged and I've got a very active long cable on hands. Freud's connection with evil nephew Bernays, new info, and it is the links and the connections to some of these people. And again, looking at the sort of Laurel Canyon bands, sort of Tavistock perfected it, introduced the British invasion, then give the CIA the exact same methodology and tactics in manipulation, and they then created the likes of Morrison with the Doors, the Byrds, the Monkees, Crosby, Stills and Nash. All these individuals, the Mamas and Papas, all had military families, or they all come from military families. They were all educated within military bases. Some of them had schizophrenia symptoms or schizophrenic symptoms. Some of them had parents with telekinesis powers. If or not that's true, who knows? But let's not rule anything out. I certainly wouldn't, and I'm not dismissing it at all. I do believe telekinesis is something yeah, thanks, Devil. I mean, like I said, you have been a breath of fresh air at the thrift store, my friend, because again, some of your comments in input has sort of fueled me a little bit more. And this is kind of what I want to talk about, our symbiotic relationships, because really and truly, if nobody watches, what is the point in this? And the point in me doing this is to try and get you to keep watching, and it is always very, very nice. You know, I'm not here to go viral. I'm not here to get millions of views. And as I said yesterday, and I'm going to say again today, I don't care. I don't even want you to smash the thumbs up, hit the likes and all that stuff, because that is recording data for the powers to be like Tavistock that put all of this together, designed for our manipulation and behavioral change purposes. 99% of you won't agree, but if you do want to copy and paste from a friend and share, get an amen up going now. Copy and paste the rabbit. Almost feels I should go on a little bit longer because Elmel is here, and Elmel, you are a little bit of a fuel and a catalyst. It does spark me to get the imagination and the mind working, but it is nearly 3 hours. I do want to get you coming back for more. So Sugar Tits, set your reminder 9 p.m. for the remainder of the night. I am pleased that you are watching in retrospect, and before you do go, Elmel, just tell them your thoughts and opinion on my MK Ultra and Monarch upload I put a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago now. It seems 4.5 hours long, but Elmel will tell you it's 4.5 hours well spent. And this is it. The more people, the more voices, devil. The more voices, the louder we will be heard. One voice in a crowd doesn't go noticed. And something I know, you know, I'm a football hooligan. I'm a football supporter. And part of our culture and behavioural patterns in belief is that if we can sing loud enough, we can encourage our team to go on and win the game. I know it's the ritualistic behaviour and the pursuit of ideology, you know, in the futility of it all. But we do believe that maybe that we can sing our team to victory, and when we go on the road to visit in opposing stadiums, like going into the enemy's territory, going into the fortress of the beast, and when we are few, that is when we sing louder and longer and harder. And when we hurt the most is when we are our most vociferous and maybe ferocious, and maybe violent. So you know, I might even talk a little bit about my football hooliganism days with you tomorrow as part of my anti-establishment upbringing, and also in terms of grey man ideology. So let's have a little chat, see again what's going on in chat before what we go on. But as I said, Devil, to answer and follow on for what you're saying, the more people that talk about this stuff, the more people whose eyes can be open, the more ears that hear, the more chance we have of standing it. And as I keep talking about the Ewoks, we'll go into this on Saturday night, guys, but the Emperor meticulously for decades, the Sith for millennium planned and planned and planned and planned to what they thought was perfection, the way to implement the one galactic order. They didn't account for the Ewoks. So what I'm going to say, Saturday night, find out more. Star Wars Decoded. We're going to a galaxy far, far away. My God, I'm even sounding more like a presenter these days. It sort of seems there. You will get to the parts that I know about soon enough. A rabbit hole is deep. And, you know, are the rabbit holes designed to keep us busy? Is this part of our programming? And, you know, if they can manipulate popsters and hippie movements, can they surely then manipulate and construct and create conspiracy movements? The underbelly and subcultures are also movements of society, and very much are probably influenced by evil draconian organizations that have nothing but our downfall as their intent. Prussian school system is what happened. Yeah, you mentioned that before, and I was touching on it, and I think, as I say, I do sort of, it's not just the reading of the articles I put together in this presentation. My God, we're going over 3 hours right now, but it's also some of the stuff that I also read in order to sort of like choose what I think is the best one to bring you, or the best information possible. All right, we're going on longer than 3 hours now. What is the plan for conspiracy theorists in the end? Don't think, no, it's not. In something I mentioned the other day about red squads in part of communist takeovers. Now, something you have to understand as well, that the National Socialists are still socialists. They weren't really that different to Marxists. They were just very sort of nationalistic in their socialism. But we're the dissidents, my darling. We are the anti-governmental types. We are the people that will be a threat to governmental takeovers, and some of us may or may not stand on the front lines and die fighting. Some of us may run and hide, some of us might duck and cover, some of us might bug out, but we are the dissidents that have been categorized and put into a compartment, and the human farm has many fields, and we are particularly our particular culture of livestock is grazing in the conspiracy fields. And yeah, I've heard all this stuff about dots on mailboxes and stuff. I'm not too sure what to make of that. And this is, again, you know, when you have think tanks that are designed to manipulate us and occupy us and get us believing things, then it's hard to rule out what's real and what isn't. You know, in looking at stuff like, you know, Tavistock Institute exists, all the things that we just looked at happened. This is all factual, but there's a lot of stuff in the truth community, and something a hero of mine, Ace Baker, the great American psyop, the no plane theorist, and Dr. Judy Woods. These are two huge heroes of mine, and sometimes they make me emotional thinking about what they're doing, because they take ridicule when they've come under attack for speaking the truth. But how much of the truth, you know, and Ace Baker, sorry, to get to what I was trying to say about him before I get a little bit emotionally overwhelmed, was, why is the truth movement been such a failure? Well, I'm going to answer that question because it was designed to fail. They didn't want us getting to the truth. They just wanted us dilly-dallying around with false information, red herrings, and controlled opposition series of events that still rely greatly on the official narrative. But Dr. Judy Woods, Ace Baker, these two individuals, saints for what they did. Re-educated. Yeah, we might be the ones that disappear, or we might be the re-educated. Remember the Clockwork Orange? Another movie come out in the 60s, Kubrick. I mean, goodness, there's a show in itself, Stanley Kubrick. Supposedly our visit will be on holiday around 3 a.m. That being said, the name eludes me. They offered him Bill. Sorry, I'm missing something there. Almal. Kathy noticed some red tape on the box. And if I didn't welcome you enough, Kathy, I'm really glad that you found the thrift store. And actually a couple of people have said that they're glad you found the thrift store also. So good company, like-minded folks. That's what we want to do. Have a little bit of harmony and good-natured spirit among men. And, you know, differences of opinion, differences of belief, political opinion is what I'm referencing to. We can put that aside and concentrate on the fact that humans need to be excellent to each other. We need to work together because there are forces and powers to be that are incomprehensible to most folks. That's why I'm trying to give you this information so you can comprehend it. But we're probably not going to be able to fight back. We're not probably be, I will say, fight back successfully. We're probably not going to be able to win because the technology and abilities and everything they have at their disposal to launch against us, AR-15s ain't going to cut it, guys. But then again, the fucking Ewoks had spears and bows and arrows. Always remember that, Ewoks, guys. Our phones, I believe, are our Terminators, people. I don't know if or not I'm getting too far down the fucking desired tinfoil hat electromagnetic conspiracy theory stereotypical thinking here, but the technology exists and we carry it in our hand. The CIA have a heart attack device which does emit a little bolt of unseen charge into the body that will cause a heart attack. And usually around 1 a.m. in the morning, I will start finding the flutters coming. And we do have camps. We have one just down the road here at the exhibition center. I've been meaning to make a video of it, but in the process of putting all this presentations together, I haven't really had much time for uploads, and in truth, sometimes my uploads will go a little bit by the wind because we don't sort of get the comment and feedback that we do in the live chat. So again, that's why I'm trying to put these presentations together But something I am thinking about that might be a little bit of a teaser, and we'll talk about more tomorrow, is this is a YouTube channel. It's my channel. Now, most YouTube channels kind of just talk about one thing, and why I don't talk about one thing on my YouTube channels, because that's what YouTube want me to do. And there are not many YouTube channels where if you go over to my playlist, you'll see has as much content. And bear in mind, I've removed like 30 playlists because that content got flagged, targeted, or removed by YouTube. And I was for a while on a code red status close to termination. We managed to navigate those stormy waters, and we are on flat waters now with no community strikes, but we are kind of sort of aggravating the algorithm a little bit. We do talk about some stuff that may be getting us a little bit more attention than we deserve. And I forgot what I was trying to say there. Really, I had a brain fart. That's why sometimes it is good that I put these presentations together, because it keeps me on track. Anyone who's paying attention, what was I saying? Help me out, help me out, help me out. My apologies, but 3 hours in. Never leave home without it. I'm still waiting. I'm aware that there's a delay. I'm trying to retract my thoughts. Sorry, I've never updated my phone. The phones, the Terminators. That's right. So the CIA have a heart attack, a T machine. This could well be the robotic Terminators. Remember that movie Maximum Override, when all the electronic devices suddenly become to life and try to kill humans? I think Kevin Bacon was in it, or am I thinking Tremors? But they had to hide on top of a rooftop in the middle of the desert because the toasters and the refrigerators were trying to kill them. Bear in mind, our toasters and refrigerators and microwaves have smart technology in them. So yeah, that's what I'm saying, guys, that the phone is the Terminator that was sent back to kill us. And something else, you know, this little battery where you plug in to charge it. Sometimes if I hold my phone like this in my lap, I can feel a tingle in my junk. And what's very disturbing is many people now who have little kids will give a tablet in their lap that is put in that electromagnetic frequency right into the undeveloped testes and fallopian tubes. Wonder what that's doing to reproductive organs, I wonder. And we also saw yesterday at the end of the Tavistock presentation what they're up to today in what they're manipulating and creating transgender kids. They have a whole institute in multiple institutes around the globe where they treat transgender children. I'm diving over here trying to remember his name. I get like that, and again, is this the electromagnetic frequencies bombarding us, making us forget? But they don't, you know, talking about the conspiracy theory circle in the underworld. They don't want us to get into the truth. They don't want us talking about the truth. Now we do carry around our own private surveillance, our own personal artificial intelligent handler. And the only sort of advice I can kind of try and pass on to you is use your cellular technology as least as you can. And, you know, in that little presentation, I said, you know, for 2 hours in the morning. And the reason I say 2 hours in the morning, because when you first get up, that is when your mind is sort of awakening, coming alive. The minute and trust me, I used to be a junkie. The first thing I did before I got out of bed was okay, now I can get past the covers. All right, so you get your little hit of dopamine, and dopamine is the drug. Remember how MK Ultra, they use drugs to control the minds? Dopamine is a natural stimulant that they are using to drug us in order to get us occupied on social media. And this is how we become clones and droids. Again, teasing you, Saturday night Star Wars special. So manipulated and target information on, you know, so they got all your information, they can target you with your programming. And there's a show that I've been watching recently called Next. It's a bit crappy in the sense that it's network based, and network stuff isn't really very gritty, and also has like sort of annoying, overly glamorous characters to sell it and keep you hooked. But it is a very compelling and interesting, fascinating story, especially what I'm talking about in terms of Terminator robots in Maximum Overdrive. But it's about an artificial intelligence that got so intelligent it went rogue. And the guy who tried to prevent, who programmed it, who's like, we need to get into this program into the mainframe and take it down. When they try to do that, then the artificial intelligence goes even more rogue and goes on a killing spree, taking aircraft down, you know, disabling the aircraft navigational system that goes down. But one, I just watched the latest episode that was very, very startling in contrast to copy and paste the bunny, but change what it's holding. That this guy sort of come home from work and he's a little bit robotic, and he walks in, his wife's, hey, my dad's coming over, I've got supper on, you're going to join us tonight? And he kind of ignores her, gets a beer, pops it open, goes into his basement, turns his computer on. And then later in the show, his wife comes down, he's still there. And she's talking to him. And like, all of a sudden, I thought maybe he's been killed. Maybe the computer has charged him with a shock. But she's like, honey, are you going to come up for supper? Are you even listening to me? What are you doing down here? Blah, 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 blah. And then she turns the light on, and then he turns up. And he's been Monarch, he's been MK'd, stands up, the computer's programs, pulls his gun, blam, 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 shoots his mother, his wife in the face, goes upstairs, shoots the father-in-law. Fast forward to the end of the episode, spoiler alert, motherfucker turns up at a CIA office, sorry, an FBI office, strapped to a bomb. Boom. Suicides himself. Monarch programming, MK Ultra. Some of these alters are programmed to suicide themselves after they've killed people. It started in a lab with copying and pasting the bunny to see if they would follow. It ended with them in bombs and fucking detonators. COVID zombie mink in Denmark. Bill Cooper beyond that. Well, goodness, Elmo, I don't want to say stuff, and I don't want to be a name dropper, but I happen to be close to somebody, and very good friends with somebody who used to be Bill Cooper's assistant. Bill Cooper, The Pale Horse, was my eye-opener. It was a piece of literature I was given to, funny enough, there's a protest in my town in 1992. We had this, like, it wasn't a bank, it wasn't a sort of money shop, it was called Mondex. And what Mondex was a chip and pin. So what you did, you went there and you give Mondex, the teller at the Mondex, £100, and then they would take the £100, then give you a card. You got £100 on your card, you can go and spend it around businesses. And their catchphrase was, Mondex is cash, cash is Mondex, cashless society, chip and pin. And it was set up across the record shop in my local town, small town I grew up in. And we'd just come out of the record shop. One of my mates was still in there buying some records, smoke, having a wait for him. And this guy comes up to me, and he had a bag over his shoulder. Vivid, I can remember this moment because this was the moment I changed. And up until that, I'd sort of been into conspiracies, UFO, Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle, and a little bit JFK was sort of a little bit of my introduction to, like, oh my goodness, wait, what, the government did this? Hang on a minute, that doesn't seem right. Wait, the government are involved? CIA? No, that don't make sense. But then, you know, cover-ups, UFOs and all this sort of stuff. But anyway, back to the story. So I'm stood outside this record shop having a smoke. This lad comes up to me with a bag, and he hands me a book. And it was a copy of To Behold a Pale White Horse. But it wasn't an actual copy of it. It was like a photocopied version. It was like a homemade version of the book. And he had a fucking shitload of them in this bag. And he gave it to me. And at first, I thought he was a Hare Krishna. I remember I used to see those types out and about then. I'm like, sorry, buddy, I got no change on me. I can't. And he goes, I don't want your money. I just want you to read the book. It'll save your life, you know. Read the book. And I'm like, all right, thanks. Sort of great. Shoved it in my knapsack, and he sort of turned away, and he come back, and he gave me a VHS. He said, you know what? If you don't read, maybe watch this. And he gave me a VHS tape, an old blank tape, and it was a very, very copied and pirated version of Bill Cooper giving the presentation of A Pale White Horse. I watched that that was my YouTube. That was the one tape I had. That was better than my porn tape at the time. I watched that until literally the tape broke, and I actually went a bit frantic when it broke, because how can I replace that? There was no internet then. So Bill Cooper is another Ace Baker, Judy Wood for me, and sort of in my time of being a TSP YouTuber, I have befriended Bill Cooper's former assistant. Again, I'm not saying that to name drop, that is a fact, and I'm not mentioning who it is because I don't want to be that guy. But Al Mel, I do have some close connect. I never knew the guy, but almost the best as. So I'm drawing fully clothed tonight to bed. That's no fun. I've got images. Wait, oh, I don't know where she is. I'm gonna get Rubber Al Mel. It wouldn't be a special TSP event without an introduction, or a cameo I should say, from Rubber Al Mel. Q clearance. Well, the QAnon cult is very reeks of Tavistock. It's like a wet dream of conspiracy theorists. It's like, oh, they're going to end everything's going to be ended. And I also believe that maybe in realms to Star Wars that the QAnon could be the one world waiting to order. But as I said, stuff for Saturday. Still trying to tease you to come back for now. What's up, Hislam? You're the Gusset girl tonight, it would seem. Hislam Managate was an inside joke of lefties until the all-right conspiracies. Sorry, that's difficult to read. Managate was an inside joke of lefties until the alt-right conspiracy theorists forced the lefties to make it a reality. But QAnon, as I said, I believe that is a manufactured Tavistock movement, fad, trend, or phase. It does seem very, very cult-like. And, you know, this is something that is you got to ask yourself. Let's imagine that the elites are as all seen and as all powerful as they really are. And QAnon is the force that's going to bring them down. And if your aunt and uncle are sharing QAnon conspiracy theories on Facebook and social media, and they're not being censored, do you think maybe the elites might have seen it once? Hey, Bill, you know, Rothschild, have you seen this over here? Bill Gates, have you seen? Come over. Yo, Elon, have you seen this? There's this movement, QAnon. They're going to bring us down at some point. They say they're going to get into our underground tunnels. Get George Soros on the phone. He needs to see that. Do you think the elites aren't unaware of it? And how we've seen that they manipulate both sides of any opposition since the Napoleonic era, right through the World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and how they manipulate the masses using, you know, the Beatles and the Stones to flip sides of the coin. This is the flip side of the coin. But anyway, we are sort of getting a little bit deep at the end of tonight's stuff, but this is all great stuff because we want to incorporate this somehow, some way, as a joint venture in the future. So as we said, I did try and end this at the 3-hour mark. We have gone a little bit extra. That's just for you, Al Mel. Anyone who is still watching this long in, thank Al Mel for our my muse. That's the word I've been looking for. Al Mel, you're my muse. Everybody needs a muse. What was Jim Morrison's muse? What was her name? The girl played by Meg Ryan in the movie. Oh God, help me out, come with you. Who was Jim Morrison's girlfriend? But that was his muse. Fed Reserve, Tavistock, Federal Reserve, product of Tavistock. Tavistock are everything, but yeah, the Federal Reserve, the devil from Jekyll Island. Yeah, we will probably have to do that at some point. Devil speak. Pam, that was it. Pam, yeah, it was Pam. Pam was his muse. There you go. Al Mel, you're a little bit like my muse. Not that I'm playing favourites, but that is a fact. No secrets at the thrift store. That's why you get to see this ugly mug instead of just the hands. Name Rubber Al Mel Pam. I can't. I've tattooed her. Do you remember? I Sharpie tattooed her butt with that Rubber Al Mel. But we'll see her Saturday. We may see her tomorrow, but we will see her before Sunday, I'm sure. And but good stuff, guys. I'm actually enjoying reading your comments because at the end of it, you do seem to be thinking. And although back to tonight's presentation, it was a lot longer than I really wanted it to be. I think maybe between an hour and an hour and a half is a good time. That being said, some topics are very, very long. I could have even dragged this out and sort of said, oh, we're going to have another tavistock episode tomorrow. But it's Thanksgiving. I want something light-hearted tomorrow. Maybe those of you that are lonely and haven't got family or friends or anybody coming to visit. And if you're a little bit, I mean, we're in Canada, it's not Thanksgiving here, but I'm going to be on my own in lonely tomorrow. So any of you Thanksgiving lonely dateless wonders got no place to go, come to the thrift store and we'll just kick it and hang out. But I was talking also a little bit about my channel and having, you know, multiple playlists, possibly going forward, maybe not every night. And I'm thinking of something called variety, the variety night. And what I want to do is maybe sort of put together a 3 or 4 hour stream, but put like maybe 30-minute programs, you know, like, oh, there's a cooking show, now there's a prepping show, maybe have a drama or a reality, do you know what I'm saying, like an actual TV network. And the reason being because one of my huge influences growing up, and one of my favorite movies in fact, was Weird Al Yankovic's UHF, when he kind of inherited a TV station from his uncle Bill Chick, who won it in a poker game. But UHF, he had a TV channel, and I always wanted to watch, like, I was never interested in watching Gandhi the movie, but in UHF he had a little commercial for a movie called Gandhi 2, and he likes driving a Ferrari and shooting an Uzi. It's like, no more Mr. Passive Aggressive. Gandhi 2, he's taking no prisoners, and I like fucking love that movie. So UHF, Weird Al Yankovic, and Alan Partridge, who you probably don't realize how much Alan Partridge-ness is in my presentations. That is because you're a North American audience and probably don't realize I'm Alan Partridge in it as much as I am, but a British audience might do. Kaz, are you still here? Are you a fan of Alan Partridge? Aha! Fucking Alan Partridge is God. He should be Prime Minister of England, really and truly. Oh, I love the idea of variety. Do it, devil speak. Yes, and that is kind of where I want to take, you know, leveling up in video games. This is where TspTv going into the next year, that is the direction I'm heading. All right, or something I want to do. So Thrifty Hill, I could run around chasing young girls in underwear. Actually, Elma, if you want to come up and be a cast, we got Maiden there. Nancy, do you want to come up? We'll get you in some garter belts and stockings, and you can run around the neighborhood and I'll chase you, and then we'll speed it up to comedic Munich. But that is a little bit of an intention. I don't think I could do it every single night, but making programming and putting together like a fake TV channel for one night, like, and here on TspTv News, let's see what the residents of Ronsonville are up to in the real lives of, you know what I'm saying, that kind of shit. Glynis, yeah, you can come and be one of the thrifty girls, if you want to. That would be hilarious if we did. You remember when we had talk about thrift stock, but COVID happened and prevented that? Some of you guys were actually contemplating paying a visit to Toronto. Imagine the fun we would have if it did happen and we could run around actually making videos, but instead of you being in chat, you would be in the actual videos and doing live streams with actual people here. So like, and over to Almel, you know, like talk shows. I've actually thought about like recording a talk show of myself interviewing myself, which is a little bit Alan Moore inspired. But as I said, guys, I've opened the doors to the thrift store a little bit wider than they were before. We've kind of had like an expansion, so to speak, or a delivery of new stock. And thrift store, again, I'll explain a lot more of this stuff tomorrow in Knowing You. But guys, as I said, I've been enjoying this series of streams probably a lot more than I've enjoyed doing streams in a long time. And I think I've got a little bit of a re-emerged enthusiasm for this, and I am enjoying doing putting these little presentations together because they're keeping me busy, keeping me occupied, and at the end of the day, when a handful of you guys that do tune in and watch regularly enjoy them and stick around chatting like you are for nearly 3 hours, it can't be a good thing, or it can't be a bad thing, right? So as I said, these are my thoughts and opinions. These are my honest, truthful thoughts and opinions. That's not to say they are honest in the it's honest in the truth. It's just opinions and food for thought, what we're trying to do. Nancy and Glynis, don't you worry, I've got some stuff planned, maybe just for the intro alone, but we've got some stuff planned for the second birthday where we might be doing, again, we've done all this little time travel stuff over the last couple of weeks, maybe we might be going back in time and up to date, but teasers, spoilers, I do try to like whet the appetite, give you a little bit of a taste of what is to come. I think that's something I probably haven't done up until recently, and so far it does seem to work. I am going to read you a comment that I did get on the JFK stream from Sunday night. I don't normally do this. I did read one of Elmal's comments a little while ago. Okay, so this is what the comment said. You have clearly been hiding your talent from the world. Your vids are top-notch and well-researched. Thank you for taking up the torch on these subjects. We need to reach as many people as possible. Thank for all your hard work. So again, that is a very rewarding comment for me, and you know, makes the efforts all the more while. So you guys are having a little bit of fun and games. Discord is open. Did I post it? I did post it, I believe. If you want, I'll post it again. Bear with me. I am going to chuck the tip jar around also. If anyone wants to chuck me $1 or $2 for my troubles, it is always welcomed and appreciated. But don't worry, guys, we're not here to start selling you EMP shields or getting that, you know, the button that you can subscribe and all that kind of stuff, Patreons and other stuff. TSP content will always be free. I love my potatoes. I've always got sacks of potatoes. They're one of my superfoods. But anyway, that will be fun. So Discord will be open after. I don't know how long I will stick around. I do want to have a little bite to eat and have a little bit of a decompress after the stream. So as I said, guys, I do got a little spoiler brand new outro for you. It's not exactly anything to get that excited about, but it is something a little bit new that you may enjoy. And I did have a special outro for the time travel series that we did do, and there aren't really that many YouTubers that make the intro part of the show, and that is a little bit of something I've also tried to do in the last week through these presentations. Every episode nearly has its own intro, and even though I used the same intro 3 times for the time travel, I made it different each time I did upload it. And again, today I did slightly change the intro, although not that much. It was a little bit lazy, but it does kind of tell a little bit of the story about what we're going to be talking about in the presentation. So while you guys are kind of in there in the chat getting your hellos on, then there's a little bit of information about the presentation to come. I'm trying to put a lot of thought and effort into this, as well as put a little bit more of myself into the end product. And you know, I said the other day, if I'm enjoying it, then hopefully you enjoy it. If I'm doing it half-heartedly, then there's a good reason that we might only see 6 people watching again. But we've had a good number today, and I do know a lot of you got family and friends around. Potatoes are a superfood, Kathy. Don't ever anybody, and again, the manipulation of the masses works with dietary systems as well. And the reason they don't want you to believe that potatoes are good for you is because they're very cheap and inexpensive, unlike stupid keto-friendly products. Potatoes are, in fact, they're full of starch, but it's a good starch. That starch will go straight through to the lower intestine and will act as a filtration system. Superfood because they contain protein, they are fiber, they also contain, they also are a carb, they have vitamins and other stuff, potassium, and the other beauty about potatoes is that they are one of the foods that you don't have to eat much of in order to get full, unlike quinoa and kale and gluten-free shit, which you need like a fucking sack load this big to get 3 calories from. But potatoes, trust me, are a superfood, and there is a reason that the Irish population was diminished rapidly as a result of the potato famine, and you can almost fake vodka out of them. Aztec isn't here. Something I have forgotten about. We're going to be cracking open is my Pruno. It has been fermenting for months and months now. That's my prison wine, my prison hooch. Let's give it another shake. Potatoes. Oh my god. I've got to burp it. it smells really good. There was a while where just the smell of it made me gag, but now it smells just like sherry. Damn. I'm actually overly surprised that that tastes good. I know it looks fucking disgusting. Wow. Yeah, so we... Ooh. I think that is going to get you fucked up. Anyway, we will be draining the Pruno, I guess. Somebody remind me to do that, because I always forget. And we will be taste testing my prison hooch. My goodness. Maybe there's... Someone was watching on Twitch once when I made it, and they said if I did start marketing it, they would buy it. Maybe there is a market for... Fuck, I already feel drunk. I mean, I don't, but you know when you have a little shot of liquor and they kind of get that little bit that goes up? Yeah, just like that. But anyway, there was my prison hooch. That's something I showed you, how to make hooch out of bread and strawberries. Don't eat green potatoes. But yeah. I did actually share multiple times a documentary called the NWO Diet, and they spelled D-I-E in big letters, diet. They're killing us softly with their lies, killing us softly with their lies. But anyway, potatoes. I eat potatoes every single day, or I used to every single day when I worked at the restaurant. But I still do eat potatoes as my prime source of protein, carb and fiber, and I'm underweight. I was going to get up and show you my flat belly, but I'm not going to do that right now. But anyway guys, potatoes are a superfood, and I've got cans of potatoes and bags and bags and bags of the instant potato flakes in my pantry. We will be doing a little bit of a Jesus, that Pruno. The pyramid's upside down. The attack on trans fats. Trans fats are good for us. The brain is made of cholesterol. The bloodstream needs cholesterol, telling us that cholesterol, oh, don't have cholesterol. It starves the brain, dumbing down a society. But anyway, guys, 3 hours. Do you know what? Let's try and wrap this up at 3 hours and 33 minutes. 333. How about that? How about that? Incidentally enough, Operation Dark Winter, when it took place, is a simulation in 2001. Interesting dates for you. Work the numerology out on this one. It took place over the 22nd and the 23rd of June. 222 plus 3. What does that make? Dark Winter. Old people being targeted by smallpox outbreak was the simulation. 2020. Reports I'm hearing from people that I know that work in hospitals that the victims that are mainly coming in with COVID symptoms are the elderly. Coincidence or not? But there you go. We're probably going to go over the 333, but let me get you the outro in place. The camera's off. So guys, it is, as you know, TspTv. It is Ship Video Productions. This was night 10 of 2 weeks of tea. It was part 2 of Let's Talk Tavistock, but the 2-year celebrations will continue tomorrow on Thanksgiving at 9 p.m. Eastern with Knowing Tea, Knowing New. Tune in, I'll be square, but don't tune out and drop out as the 60s rhetoric mind control mantra suggested. Anyway guys, thanks for watching Ship Video Productions. See you guys tomorrow. Till then, keep it thrifty, take care, and remember, most importantly, be excellent to each other. Check out this outro though.